He sees a clean night between stars, a galaxy where the warp whispers softly instead of screaming, and decides humanity might learn without losing its soul. He shapes numbers like prayers, feeding a sun of thought into a cracked webway vein, mapping a path to a continuum where law outruns madness. He sees a clean night between stars, a galaxy where the warp whispers softly instead of screaming, and decides humanity might learn without losing its soul. He shapes numbers like prayers, feeding a sun of thought into a cracked webway vein, mapping a path to a continuum where law outruns madness. He knows the toll. Every step will cost him fire, and the breach will scar what it touches. He accepts because duty is weight, not excuse. The veil tears. A filament of day unfurls above Mars, bright as a second dawn and loud as metal being born. Shipyards sprawl below like a silver forest. Scaffolds cradle saucers and nacelles. Tugcraft blink blue. The light becomes a gate, and through it walks a figure in hammered gold, a towering man whose presence tilts the air. Power spills in waves that smell like hot stone and salt rain. On Starbase Utopia, Planitia Control, a supervisor flinches and then remembers to breathe. Status panes cascade. Sees a clean night between stars, a galaxy where the warp whispers softly instead of screaming, and decides humanity might learn without losing its soul. He shapes numbers like prayers, feeding a sun of thought into a cracked webway vein, mapping a path to a continuum where law outruns madness. He knows the toll. Every step will cost him fire, and the breach will scar what it touches. He accepts because duty is weight, not excuse. The veil tears. A filament of day unfurls above Mars, bright as a second dawn and loud as metal being born. Shipyards sprawl below like a silver forest. Scaffolds cradle saucers and nacelles. Tugcraft blink blue. The light becomes a gate, and through it walks a figure in hammered gold, a towering man whose presence tilts the air. Power spills in waves that smell like hot stone and salt rain. On Starbase Utopia, Planitia Control, a supervisor flinches and then remembers to breathe. Sees a clean night between stars, a galaxy where the warp whispers softly instead of screaming, and decides humanity might learn without losing its soul. He shapes numbers like prayers, feeding a sun of thought into a cracked webway vein, mapping a path to a continuum where law outruns madness. He knows the toll. Every step will cost him fire, and the breach will scar what it touches. He accepts because duty is weight, not excuse. The veil tears. A filament of day unfurls above Mars, bright as a second dawn and loud as metal being born. Shipyards sprawl below like a silver forest. Scaffolds cradle saucers and nacelles. Tugcraft blink blue. The light becomes a gate, and through it walks a figure in hammered gold, a towering man whose presence tilts the air. Power spills in waves that smell like hot stone and salt rain. On Starbase Utopia, Planitia Control, a supervisor flinches and then remembers to breathe. Status panes cascade red. Subspace breach in high orbit, above slipway 13. Unknown contact. Humanoid. No, that's not right. Reading impossible mass. She feels the floor vibrate as hull alarms thrum through the spindle. Someone drops a mug. It shatters like a small storm. The figure looks down, eyes molten with buried suns, and listens to a million minds at once. He sorts fear from awe, panic from purpose. Gravity bows. He eases it back with a thought as soft as a father setting down a sleeping child. Mars' thin air flashes with aurora, green and gold veining red sky. Magnetic lines buckle. A chain of yard reactors, mid-calibration for a galaxy-class warp core, begins to cascade. The Emperor pivots in nothingness, spreads his hands, and catches the failure like a thrown blade. The failure hits him in the soul. Gold fades to red, then back. Runes along his armor gutter like coals in a storm. He pushes the charge sideways into void, sheathing it in Ordermath. The pulse goes dark, and 1,000 workers live long enough to shake. A welder on truss B12 stares at his hands and laughs because he can still feel them. He had thought that was it. A white curtain, a wife widowed in an instant. His comm is a babble of voices. "We're alive," someone says, and it sounds like a new gospel. Red alert rolls across the Sol system like distant thunder. In San Francisco, cadets pivot on the parade ground as Academy sirens pulse. A child at the Presidio looks up through the bay haze and thinks an angel landed on Mars. A Vulcan counselor notes the child's phrasing and chooses silence. Far beyond, in the velvet dark near Neptune, a ship turns. Enterprise D adjusts attitude like a dancer remembering a step. On the bridge, light is clean and even, but the air is tight with old scars. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stands very still, because some memories are chains and some are anchors, and he refuses to forget which is which. "Report," he says. "Localized subspace shear centered over Utopia Planitia," says Data at Ops, voice calm as a metronome. "Emergent harmonic resembles an Omega-class instability. Magnitude decreasing. No, fluctuating." His fingers flow across the console. There is a humanoid signature within the breach locus. Mass is variable. At that range, Riker leans forward, jaw set. Humanoid. On screen, Picard says. The image steals breath. A man clad in a cathedral of armor, wreathed in light that does not glare, standing above Mars like a carved prayer. Around him, aurora curls in disciplined shapes, circles, spirals, lattice. The light seems to listen to him. "Magnify," Beverly Crusher says softly. His face. They do, and what fills the screen is not young or old, but something built over centuries of standing between teeth and throat. His eyes are amber storms. They turn as if he hears their attention, and for a heartbeat, Picard feels seen, weighed, and not dismissed. Hailing frequencies open with the certainty of habit. Worf's hands steady yet tactical. "Unknown entity," Picard says, tone careful as a diplomat's step. "This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. You are in Federation space. State your intentions." In orbit, the Golden Man answers by turning toward their voice, and the light around him reshapes like language. His own voice follows, carried across subspace without a carrier, just present, bass and clear, a bell in a deep hall. "To shelter the species of man," he says, "and to pay what must be paid for that shelter." The bridge holds its breath. Somewhere in comms, a petty officer whispers. He sounds like a book. "Identify yourself," Picard says. He inclines his head. "I am the Emperor of Mankind." The title lands like a stone dropped into glass water. Riker's brow climbs. Troy's eyes narrow a fraction, feeling currents that do not run through him but around him, an eddy without a center. Worf stiffens because an emperor is a word with sharp edges on his homeworld too. Before Picard can shape the next step, space hiccups and laughs. Q is already sitting in Picard's chair when they realize it. He lounges as if he grew there, legs crossed, smile, tidy and serrated. "Mon capitaine," he purrs, hands steepled. "You've really outdone yourself. Last week it was a temporal paradox with training wheels. This week you fish an apex predator out of a burned pantry." Picard's voice thins. "Q." "Always a pleasure," Q says, rising without moving. He's beside the view screen now, and then standing on the hull above Mars. Same suit, no breath. He taps the air out of pure irritation. "You," he says to the golden figure, "are very far from home." The smell of your breach offends my sensibilities and my sense of symmetry. The Emperor regards him with the patience of old mountains. Not a god, he says, not unkindly. A warden who wants to be a judge. Q tilts his head, feeling the shape of the insult and smiling anyway. And you are a tyrant who wants to be a father. He glances back at the Enterprise. He'll tell you he brings order. He'll forget to mention the ash piles it requires. Picard steps forward, thread pulled taut. Q, enough. If you have a complaint, lodge it with someone who cares. I am, Q says, and gestures at the solar system like a maitre d' with a particularly difficult reservation. You live here. He just painted your subspace with a warning label. The Emperor looks down, into himself, and counts what it cost. The breach still whispers up his spine, a cold line. He can feel the wound he made in this precise medium. Subspace is not the warp, but he scarred it anyway. He files the guild where he keeps his oaths. On Mars, a yard chief leans on a rail and watches the aurora fade. She has been working ships for 27 years and has never seen light behave like a soldier on parade. Get me status on those reactors, she snaps, voice finding muscle again. And somebody thank whoever that man is. The aurora flicks. It returns in a pattern that makes no meteorological sense. Data is first to see it. Captain, he says, and the main display updates. A lattice in subspace, like a net being woven by a methodical hand. It runs outward from the breach, faint and regular. Harmonics nested within harmonics. Omega, Riker says, and it is not a question, not really, because if it is, that then the answer is, everything breaks. Omega-like, Data says, but the molecule is not present. This is a self-similar scar, not a particular phenomenon. Q rolls his eyes. You're welcome, he tells the universe. I warned you. Picard steeples his fingers, eyes still on the figure above Mars. He hears old metal and screams behind him, the Borgic choir that once wore his body like a tool. He will not let fear write this script. Mr. Worf, stand by all defensive systems. Mr. Data, notify Starfleet Command. Counselor, stay with me. He opens the channel again. Emperor, he says, you have saved lives. You have also, unintentionally, damaged the medium our ships rely upon to travel. We need to understand your capabilities and your limits. Will you permit us to render assistance and negotiate terms of your presence? The Emperor studies the blue and white ship with its calm eyes and its bruised captain. Yes, he says, I am not here to conquer, but your sky is loud with an old enemy of mine, and it will come to this wound. Worf glances at Picard, frowning. Old enemy. The answer arrives as a scent Riker will never forget. Ozone and cold guilt. Space blossoms near the orbit of Saturn, petaled green. A transwarp aperture yawns like a hungry mouth. The Borg arrive with the politeness of a hammer. Contact, Worf barks. A cube, center of aperture. Multiple probes, vectoring toward Mars. They are broadcasting a standard assimilation directive. On Mars, a man on the yard floor looks up from a ruined coffee and sees a square eclipse eat a slice of stars. He thinks of old nightmares and new prayers. He runs because running is the closest civilians have to a weapon. The Emperor turns toward the cube, and for an instant his light flares too bright and too old. He clamps it down so hard the edges of his mind spark. They smell like bad order, he murmurs. A hive with a broken queen. On the Enterprise bridge, sound narrows. Red alert, Picard says, voice crystalline. All hands to battle stations. Mr. Data, vector us between that cube and Mars. Plot an intercept course. Worf, arm phasers and load quantum torpedoes. Target weapon nodes, tractor emitters, and shield harmonics. And the Emperor, Riker says. because you cannot assign a star to a firing arc. Open a channel, Picard says. It is already open. I will hold their eye, the Emperor says. Do not fire upon me, whatever I seem to do. Q. Flickers beside Picard, suddenly solemn. Do you see, Jean-Luc, Apex? He sounds almost like a friend who doesn't want to watch a friend break his hands. The first Borg probe slashes inward, a dart with a square soul. The Emperor moves in a way no scan predicts. He is not a ship, but he shifts with course corrections like a helmsman of nothing. Every vector is chosen with an old general's cruelty. He takes the probe's cutting beam on his forearm, catches it with a net of thought, folds it, and hands it back. The probe shears, quiet as paper. Codex note. Subspace accepts structure. Will, properly shaped, can bind a transient geometry where none exists, at a cost scale to the binding mind. The cost is immediate. The lattice flares. Picard's displays stutter with warnings. Warp field integrity across the system dips 2%, then 3%. Every ship at impulse holds their breath. Data's brow tilts by a degree only Beverly would notice. Captain, he says, the Emperor's interaction with subspace is increasing the instability by a measurable factor. He's drawing it, Riker says, understanding ugly and fast. Or it's drawing him. The cube reorients. It ignores the Enterprise because the Enterprise is a ship, and the golden thing is an argument. Beams triangulate. Graviton cutters flare and converge. Spheres bud from cube skin like malignant fruit. Evasive pattern Theta 7, Picard says. Keep us between Mars and the cube. Mr. Worf, fire at will. Phaser arrays slice clean lines through black. Quantum torpedoes pop like newborn stars, detonating in fusion petals across shield vectors. Borg shields adapt, but not perfectly. Starfleet has been studying. The Enterprise casts breathing room and bleeds for it. The Emperor raises his right hand and the light in him threads into a shape. A spear, 20 meters long, formed of logic and wrath. He throws it. It flies like a thought too fast for doubt and nails a sphere through its core. It falls apart with slow grace, pieces entering decay orbits like a rain of quiet anvils. Now he's just showing off, Q mutters, but he sounds impressed against his will. Medical teams to stand by, Beverly says into her comm, because debris always finds someone soft. Admiral Nechayev is calling from Starfleet Command. Data reports. Priority 1 channel. On screen, Picard says, not turning. Her face is a blade honed against disaster. Captain, she says without preamble, contain that situation. Saul is not a proving ground. Who is that? Picard does not sigh. An entity calling himself the Emperor of Mankind. He has averted a reactor cascade at Utopia Planitia and is currently engaging the Borg. I see him, Nechayev says, eyes narrowing as if she can reduce him by staring. He's made a mess of subspace. Section 31 is already screaming in my other ear about Omega. You will prevent further damage. Understood. Understood, Picard says, hating the necessary edge in her voice less than he once would have. He saved lives, and he may have just broken our legs, Nechayev snaps. Do your job, Captain. Command out. The channel dies. Riker exhales through his teeth. Cheerful as ever. Troy's gaze stays on Mars. She's afraid, she says. It comes out like that sometimes. The cube decides diplomacy is inefficient. A beam rakes toward Mars. The Emperor steps into it as if stepping in front of a small child and a bullet. The beam accepts his existence for a fraction of a second and then throws a tantrum, flaring, trying to find a frequency that is not taken. He pushes back, not with raw heat, but with pattern, rewriting the beam's argument until it unthreads. He bleeds for it anyway. Lines of gold crack across his skin under the armor, invisible to all but him. He files that pain where he files his other debts. On the yard, a worker named Shirin feels the beam change like a weather pattern, suddenly obeying city grid. She crouches with 3 others beneath the console and laughs without humor. "He's in front of us," she says, shaking. "He's literally in front of us." The Enterprise slips between angles, giving Mars's sky a ship to look at. "Concentrated fire on port shield node 14, Worf says, eyes bright with a warrior's arithmetic. They are recalibrating slower than expected. Data nods minutely. Our last encounter with a similarly configured cube suggests a commander entity. If the Emperor's presence is disrupting its coordination, that may explain the lag. "Exploit it," Picard says. "Stay clear of his arc." Q appears upside down because gravity is for people with no imagination. "Mon Capitaine, do you know what your golden guest is doing to your nice, neat roadways?" He taps the tactical readout and makes it dance like a cat toy. "He's nailing planks over a river. It's charming. It will collapse." "He is also saving lives," Picard snaps. And he does not apologize for the heat. The cube vomits more spheres and a lance of pale lightning that has never been seen in Starfleet textbooks. It strikes the Emperor and finds no heat to eat, so it tries to eat memory. For a moment, he is elsewhere, standing on a hill of skulls that are also stars. He bites down on the inside land of his mind so hard that his metaphors bleed and forces himself back into this system with these people and their tender faith in rules. Picard sees him flicker and locks his jaw. "Options number 1. Task Force," Riker says. "We call everything in system and pull in the Jupiter defense grid. We bait the cube off Mars with a concentrated push, make it chase us toward the outer system. Buy the yard's time to stabilize. Keep him," he gestures at the screen, at the man in gold, "in reserve on a tight leash." "He will not accept a leash," Worf says, not unadmiring. "He will accept an argument," Picard says. He opens the channel again, feeling the words like fingers feeling for a pulse. "Emperor, you said this is an old enemy. Can you hold their attention while we draw the cube away from Mars?" "Yes," the Emperor says. He is very still now, the way a hunter is still when the animal looks up. "But every time I touch your subspace like this, I carve it. Your travel will suffer. Your people will be stranded if I make too many cuts." "That is unacceptable," Achaev says, suddenly back on the line, "because admirals are always listening when you wish they weren't. Captain, you will prevent that damage. Emperor, if that is your title, you will desist. You will die," the Emperor says without malice. "I would prefer that you did not." Picard steps into the space between an irresistible force and an immovable bureaucracy. "Admiral, with respect, let me manage my battle space. Emperor, we will create the lane. Use only as much of your influence as you must. And if I ask you to stop, you stop. Do we have an accord?" The golden head dips an inch. "We do." Q claps once, very slowly. "A bargain. How civilized. Let me sprinkle a little spice." He snaps, and every console on the bridge shows a second set of data. A ghostly overlay of possible futures, an insane gift no one asked for. In none of them does this end easily. "Get that off my ship," Picard says. "Fine," Q says, and the futures vanish. "I just wanted you to see the shape of the game board." The Enterprise lunges. The task force grows out of the dark like a city assembling itself mid-air. The Thunderchild, the Melbourne, the Ajax, 2 Nebula class with their squared shoulders, a dozen smaller escorts, a lattice of phasers and photon torpedoes weaving a net. Jupiter's stations wake their guns like sleeping giants. Its moon's dark sides glare with intentional lights. "Formation Delta," Riker orders on the fleet channel. his voice stepping into a role it knows. Follow our lead. Target the cube's forward nodes. Thunderchild, draw their sensors. Melbourne, flank right. Ajax, hold back and hit what lives. The Emperor moves with them, neither in formation nor out. He's his own geometry. He drives a line of light through space, not doing the physics so much as convincing the physics to want to be done. The cube follows because it must. Beverly watches the feed with a doctor's hunger to understand wounds before they open. He's burning himself, she murmurs, not sure to whom. Not his body. Whatever it is, he burns through to do this. That is his cost, Troy says, and there is grief in her voice for a stranger who chose to carry something sharp. The cube takes the bait. It turns like a building deciding to move. The net tightens. The fleet moves. The Emperor is the bright nail holding a hole open in the universe, and the Borg keep aiming for that nail. They are simple like that. It is what made them terrible and what makes them predictable. Brace for return fire, Worf says. They are powering a multi-vector strike. Belay scatter, Picard says. Stay tight. On my mark. 3, 2, mark. The grid sings. Torpedoes bloom along calculated lines. Phasers stitch. Tractor beams grab space and pull. The Borg strike disperses across too many offensive channels, and they lose a slice of themselves to efficiency. The cube slows. Minimal effect, Data reports. And then, because he is not cruel, adds, but cumulative. The Emperor plunges both arms into nothing and drags. The cube flinches in the only way it can, a tiny wobble at relativistic scale. It is enough. Jupiter's massive gravity well opens its arms and says, gently, come here. Nice, Riker breathes. Do not compliment him too much, Q says, but his eyes are on the Emperor like a scholar at a dangerous lecture. On Mars, the Yard Chief cancels the evacuation order for 3 slips. She doesn't want to, because inertia is comfortable. But the Golden Man and the ugly cube and the bright ships have conspired to give her a gap. And she is not in the business of wasting gaps. Back to work, she snarls at her trembling crew. We're Starfleet. We don't wait for fate. We muscle it. Picard watches the cube tilt, the Emperor's light shift. The fleet breathe as one, and thinks, this is what we are when we are not afraid. Then he hears the soft sound of fear anyway, because a new aperture tears itself open near Venus, and the air goes thin. New contacts, Worf says. Multiple signatures. A second cube. 2 more probes. They are broadcasting different frequencies, attempting to triangulate the instability. The Borg have smelled Omega before, Riker says. They want it. They want to contain it, Data says, and weaponize the knowledge. They will break your roads to own your cities, the Emperor says. He sounds tired for the first time. The child's voice returns like a knife on a string. Picard, she says, sword defense procedures are in effect. The Jupiter station grid is authorized to open fire at full yield. Protect Utopia Planitia at all costs. And if that entity endangers our warp capability, you will stop him. Is that understood? Picard's hands curl and open. Understood, Admiral. Q floats in the air between Picard and the screen, upside down again, because now is when he must be insufferable. Do you know the fun part, Jean-Luc? He's right. They are right. Everyone is right. Someone still bleeds. The Emperor listens to their voices, to the Yard's prayer, to the child in San Francisco, whispering angel, and then, bolder, please don't go. He listens to the hive and hears the absence where a queen should be. He wonders, briefly, if he can teach this galaxy to be hard without being cruel. Then he decides to try because deciding is what he exists to do. Name your plan, he says. Picard names it like a captain, crisp and spare. We split the field. Enterprise leads a spearhead past the first cube to draw the second out of position. Thunderchild and Ajax keep the first cube tangled in Jupiter's well. We deny them Mars. We buy the yard time. And you hold their gaze. No more lattice shaping than necessary. If it becomes necessary to disengage, you disengage. Do you agree? I agree, the Emperor says. His light steadies. Mr. Crusher, Picard says, and Wesley is not at the helm anymore. And it still feels strange that he has to say, Mr. LaForge for warp, which is offline for the system anyway. He amends without missing beats. Helm, take us in. Full impulse. Hold us clean. Worf, give me an opening. The Enterprise answers like a living thing delighted to be asked to dance again. She slides under a beam that would have chewed a lesser hull, skims a bow awake on the cube's dark skin. Her phasers draw a smile across it that is not friendly. The second cube notices because the first one just felt something like insult. The Emperor moves up and left, which is also down and before, in ways that make physics shrug and say, fine, be like that. Beams rake the space he was. He's already where they will be. He keeps the damage to the lattice within a tolerance he sets and resets every 3 heartbeats. He keeps the pain, because he has always kept the pain, so others do not learn how. On Earth, in a room under Starfleet command, Section 31 puts a folder on a table. Omega Contingency. A Vulcan in a grey robe watches without blinking. Logic suggests containment, she says. Logic suggests a leash, the man across from her says. He smiles and it does not reach his eyes. We'll draft one. Q is suddenly in that room, rolling a grape between his fingers, unseen. Draft away, he whispers, and the grape becomes a microcosm of a universe that never had to learn how to bleed. The fleet's net compresses. The first cube creaks in the way a geometry creaks. The second cube misjudges speed and hits a knife. The Enterprise put in space 2 seconds ago. The knife is a pattern of gravity and light, and it bites. The cube bleeds sparks and regs and slows. Adjust course, Data says, fingers blurring. If we can maintain this rate... Captain, Troy says, voice tight. The Emperor is... She doesn't have a word for it. He's carrying more than pain. It's like... debt. Of course he is, Q says, tired now, because even games need rules, and he can feel the strain of all the ones he's broken to be here. He always carries the bill. The bill comes due in a shiver across every wall panel in the system. The lattice, for all his careful touch, reflects and resonates. Every ship running hot feels its drive cough. Every freighter at the edge of Saul slows, like a horse feeling mud. Nechaev's voice cuts glass. Picard, your leash. Picard's mouth is a hard line. Emperor, he says, disengage lattice work. Hold their fire bare-handed if you must. The Emperor almost smiles at the impossible order and complies with the possible part. He lets go of the neat net he's been weaving and takes the next beam on raw will, cupping it, folding it inside himself, crushing the hunger out of it. It hurts. His armor sings with hairline fractures only he can hear. Jupiter, loyal, deep, throws its gravity like a shoulder into the first cube. The fleet bites and holds. The second cube tries to skirt wide and finds the Enterprise and a golden man in its road. We hold here, Picard says. All ships, focus fire. The Borg respond by changing the rules, as they do. They open a smaller aperture, mean and efficient, right behind the Emperor, and a lance of null light spears for the core of him. It is not heat, it is subtraction. He turns too late and takes it in the flank of his spirit. He feels the place it passes through and what it takes. A memory of warmth in a lesser age. A laugh he heard and kept. He roars without sound. The roar goes nowhere because sound is for air, and he is standing in the old loneliness where he lives. Now, Worf says, seizing the beat like a drummer. Concentrate fire. The second cube staggers into Jupiter's long arm just as the first begins to come apart in bright sheets. The Borg adapt. The Borg always adapt. But for a heartbeat, they are still learning a man. Status, Picard asks, eyes flicking from cube to Emperor and back. Hull integrity holding, Data says. Borg weapon nodes 9 through 12 are offline. Jupiter Station reports minimal collateral. Utopia Planitia reports reactor stabilized. Good, Picard says, and feels the word like a piece of bread in a hungry mouth. Keep us between. Q materializes on the main viewer, tiny and disrespectful of scale. You are also very yourself today, he says, and it is not really an insult. He glances at the Emperor, and his eyes for once have no jokes in them. Careful, Golden One. This galaxy is polite. It will ask you to use knives and call it compromise. I have used worse for worse, the Emperor says. He shifts his weight, ready to hurt again, and refuses to tally the wounds until after. The cube buckles. The fleet breathes. A plan exists, alive and sufficient, and it will work as long as nothing new happens. Something new happens. It always does. The null beam that speared the Emperor left a taste in the air that the Borg learn like a song. They sing it at him again, from a different angle, and the second time, the subtraction is hungrier. He shunts it through a corner of himself that already aches, and the ache deepens into a hole. He can feel subspace brush the wound, like a cat rubbing a bruise. He wonders, briefly, if this medium has predators he has not yet named. Captain, Beverly says softly, he's hurt, not physically, but hurt. Then we finish this, Picard says, because mercy sometimes looks like efficiency. The Thunder Child takes a beam that would have diced her and shrugs it off with a roll that makes Riker grin. Ajax threads a torpedo through an opening, and the detonation is such that even a Borg has to respect it. The first cube becomes wreckage with opinions. The second cube decides it dislikes those opinions and begins to withdraw, calculating a cost-benefit with all the warmth of ice. Do not let them leave with what they have learned, Nechayev says. You have my authorization to expend whatever you must. The Emperor hears that like a familiar chord. Sacrifice as currency. He turns, bleeding invisible, and readies the kind of act that would stitch the lattice into something more than a scar. He could end this in one glorious cut. Picard sees it. He does not know the mechanics. He knows the look. No, he says aloud into the channel. We made a bargain. The Emperor holds the power like a glass of water held over someone's head. He lowers it. He lets the second cube live to learn something else. What it means to retreat from a species that refuses to be food. The Borg open a transwarp aperture with a sulk only a machine could deny and leave. Silence finds the bridge, bruised and tasting of copper. Consoles tick. Breaths are taken. Stand down from red alert, Picard says. He sags only in the soul, never the spine. Damage reports. Medical, dispatch teams to Utopia Planitia. Mr. Data, begin a full analysis of subspace integrity. Counselor, stay with me. On Mars, the Yard Chief sits on a crate for the first time in 3 hours and realizes her hands are shaking. Shirin lights a candle in her mind for a gold man she doesn't understand. Cadets in San Francisco hug in an undignified cluster and then straighten up because someone is watching. The Emperor floats above the red world and looks at his hands. He counts what he has spent. He cannot count it all. He hears the word Emperor in 1,000 voices and finds it too heavy here, where people do not use titles as shields. Q appears beside him, neither gloating nor gentle. They will want to leash you, he says quietly. They will say it is for the common good. Sometimes it will be true. Sometimes it will be an excuse. I can accept rules, the Emperor says, I cannot accept chains. Q's smile is thin and old. We'll see which is which. Starfleet calls, not with a ship's voice, but with a world's. Emperor, Picard says, and there is gratitude and iron inside the syllables. Thank you. We need to speak. We need to understand your effect on our subspace, and we need to ensure Sol remains safe. I will come, the Emperor says. He looks at Mars one more heartbeat. Then he turns toward the blue and white world where people argue in good faith, as if it is a sport, and he approves. Transporters are offline in the system, data notes. Subspace instability has degraded pattern coherence beyond safe tolerances. Shuttles then, Riker says, or we can bring him aboard the hard way. He doesn't need either, Troy murmurs, watching the golden figure draw closer without moving. He decides to be closer, and he is. The armor glints in Earth's light. The San Francisco skyline pricks the horizon like polite teeth. Golden Gate Bridge is a red line against a blue book. Starfleet headquarters gleams. The Emperor descends like a new standard in an old war. Nechayev meets him with security at her flanks and her jaw set. Picard is there too, arms behind his back. A diplomat in a soldier's day. Q is nowhere and everywhere. Welcome to Earth, Picard says, choosing courtesy as a first weapon. We are grateful. We are cautious. I ask no less, the Emperor says, and the words are not a tactic. Caution is a virtue when paired with courage. Nechayev looks up at him, unimpressed by ceremony. You will submit to a debrief, she says. You will provide a full account of your capabilities, your origin, and your intentions. You will cease any action that further destabilizes subspace. If you cannot comply, we will treat you as a hostile entity. He considers her and does not condescend. I will speak, he says. I will not submit to chains disguised as laws. I will limit my touch on your sky, and I will defend your people when predators come. Who empowered you to make that promise? She demands. No one, he says, and everyone who ever asked to live. Picard steps into the breath after the blow and turns it into a hand offered. Admiral, he says, let us begin with gratitude and questions, not threats. Emperor, will you accept a temporary status? Allied non-affiliated entity under observational protocols. It grants freedom of movement with restrictions around sensitive infrastructure and a requirement to coordinate in emergencies. That is a leash made of trust, the Emperor says. I accept. Nechayev grunts because this is as good as an uncompromising woman gives when reality does not respect her schedules. You will meet Starfleet intelligence, she says, and consultant. The air hums like a judgment arriving on a velvet chair. Q leans in a doorway that was not there before. You called, he asks, innocent as a fox. Picard rubs the bridge of his nose. Of course. The Emperor looks at Q and sees a creature bound to a court that confuses games with godhood. He nods as if to a colleague whose work he respects and methods he does not. Shall we speak of costs? He asks them both. And a low thrill runs through the room because men who know bills are the men who make worlds last. They go inside. Behind them, under that red bridge, a child puts a hand on the railing and whispers a thank you into the wind. The water takes it nowhere and everywhere. The day keeps going because that is what days do when people make them. And above Mars, the lattice in subspace glows very faintly, like a scar that will ache when it rains. Night falls and rises in the same motion across the Pacific, as if the planet breathes deeper for a while. Rescue shuttles stitch the space above Mars. Enterprise holds a Guardian's orbit. The golden figure stands at the edge of Earth's sky like a watchman at a city gate. The lattice is a faint ache in subspace, quiet enough that transporters cough but do not die. Picard takes the first steps that look like triage and feel like diplomacy. Riker, you and Worf coordinate with Jupiter Station and Utopia Planitia. Counselor, begin outreach to civilian authorities and the press. Mr. Data, I want a working model of the lattice's decay curve. Doctor, you will. I know, Beverly says, a gentle steel. We'll be ready for injuries that won't show on scans. The Emperor does not come aboard in a beam. He chooses a corridor and is in it. The air pressure not changing because he is too careful to make people dizzy. Security braces, then lowers rifles because fear alone is not a good enough reason to point a weapon. He moves like a hymn written for a different choir. Geordi meets him with a toolbox and an honest smile he doesn't know how to hide. Sir, he says, then pauses because Sir feels small. Emperor, I'm Geordi LaForge, Chief Engineer. If you're willing, I'd love to pick your brain about subspace harmonics. I think we can build a counterfield that, well, reduces the cutting you're doing when you push. That is wise, the Emperor says. Teach me your terms. I will teach you where terms end. They go to main engineering. The warp core is asleep. It hums in its dreams like a great blue lung. They stand inside a cathedral of pylons and light. Geordi projects a model. The Sol system as a bead fold, crisscrossed by faint lines like healing cracks in glass. Every time you bind a shape in subspace, Geordi says, it reflects. It sets up echoes that make it harder for warp fields to stay coherent. But if we can pre-shape a corridor, a safe lane, we can bleed the stress into a place that's already fortified. It's like sandbags before a flood. The Emperor watches the simulation and feels an old pride. Here is a man who looks at the world and looks again and sees, not a wall, but a way. It will be brittle, he says. It will save many and sometimes snap. Geordi nods. I know, but we can choose where it snaps. The plan builds itself under their hands. A narrow, dynamically tuned corridor, anchored between Earth's moon and a Lagrange point near Jupiter. A place to push where the scars will overlap and heal in a pattern. It will reduce the damage by half, maybe more. It will cost a wedge of travel for 36 hours if it fails. It is a good bargain. The test arrives not as a drill, but a need. A Borg skirmisher slips from a small, dirty aperture just beyond Mars' orbit. A late gift, a scavenger. It cuts for the yard like a scavenger gull. It flashes a beam that tastes like a memory and tries to eat the Emperor again. Enterprise, engage, Picard says. Mr. LaForge, is the corridor ready? Ready enough, Geordi says, jaw tight. Bringing the deflector array to full power. Modulating the coronal egress frequency to match his pattern, Captain. He glances at the Emperor, too honest to pretend. With your permission. Do it, the Emperor says. The deflector dish wakes, a sun behind a blue veil. The corridor rights itself in the dark. Not a scar, but a brace. It says bend here to a universe that would otherwise bend anywhere. The Emperor steps into it like a sprinter finding a lane and pulls the skirmisher's fire sideways into the brace. The beam snarls and goes docile like a dog redirected by a hand that knows dogs. He cuts the skirmisher's engine with something gentler than force. He tells the exhaust to forget how to be coherent for a second. The ship drifts. Enterprise tags it with a pulse clean enough to file. It dies without fanfare and without shrapnel. Minimal collateral, Data reports. The corridor's integrity dropped by the 8.6%. Recovery curve projected within 2 hours. Warp traffic should resume nominal capacity in that window. Nice catch, Riker says. And it is not swagger. It is relief you can keep in your pocket. Codex note. A tuned deflector field can be used as a sacrificial resonator, drawing subspace stress into pre-fortified harmonics to limit systemic degradation during extreme manipulations. The fleet exhales. The yards return to work. Civilians forget, for half an hour, to be afraid. They gather in a war room that still smells faintly of new paint. Starfleet flags and clean surfaces. Light at that quiet temperature Picard likes, because it makes people confess without noticing. Nechayev stands at the head of the table, because chairs do not make rank. Picard to her right. The Emperor not at the table, and not at it. Leaning as if chairs were a concession he can afford the others, but not himself. On the far side, two shadows make their introductions without names. A human man in a plain black suit with a face like the inside of a safe. A Vulcan woman in slate robes, the tips of her fingers stained slightly green from an old ink. Section 31, not pretending to be anything else, with a Vulcan High Command liaison, who is, technically, here to consult. We'll be brisk, Nechayev says. We have civilians to reassure and predators to deter. Captain Picard, your after-action summary. Picard delivers it like a prayer without gods, crisp, complete, unadorned. He states what the Emperor did. He states what damage it caused. He does not apologize. He does not flatter. Section 31 assesses the lattice at Omega adjacent risk, the man in black says, not bothering to hide the pleasure he takes in saying, assesses. Containment protocols exist for a reason. We propose a hard exclusion zone around Sol. No lattice manipulation within 30 AUs. He can play Guardian Angel elsewhere. I do not play Guardian, the Emperor says. Voice not louder, only lower. Be that as it may, the man continues. The Federation cannot allow an unvetted entity to scar our strategic mobility. We have convoys, colonies, borders that breathe because our ships can. We leash power or we drown in its wake. The Vulcan laces her fingers. Logic favors restrictions when costs are quantifiable, she says. She looks at the Emperor and chooses a word carefully. Interventions carry non-linear costs in a medium foundational to Federation infrastructure. Coordination is not a leash, it is a map. Leashes are maps with knots, Riker mutters, too low to travel far. Troy leans forward. What will you do if he refuses? She asks the black-suited man. Mild as tea and twice as testy. Then we escalate to denial, he says. He looks at Nechayev, and the look is grease pretending to be oil. We have avenues. You have none in my soul, Nechayev says, calm as frost. It surprises Picard. She does not like being preempted, and she does not like the smell of men who enjoy emergencies. We will coordinate. We will not provoke. The Emperor waits until the waves of tone die back. We agree on the problem, he says. You need freedom to move. I need to spend myself where it matters most. We must build roads that do not require me to bleed for every stone. Your engineer has a good mind. We can place bracing at key choke points, Jupiter, Vulcan, Andoria, Tela, Proxima. I will use those lanes when I must. I will not carve where I do not need. That is acceptable, the Vulcan says. Provisional, the black-suited man says. He smiles without amusement. We will also require access to your capabilities. Denied, Picard says before the Emperor can open his mouth. Because sometimes mercy looks like stepping in front of a train. Noted, the man says, unruffled, because he expected the no and placed a bet on the next yes. Then we'll require telemetry. If we can understand the exact burden his actions place on subspace, we can pre-position countermeasures and reduce risk. That is reasonable, Picard says, gaze steady on the Emperor. If you consent. I consent to tools, the Emperor says, not to collars. Nechayev taps a pad. We'll draft a protocol. You'll review it. We will move quickly. She turns to the Emperor and lets steel own her diction. Now speak plainly. Who is this old enemy to you? They called themselves many things, he says. Their structure always tasted the same. A single argument sung by too many mouths. They take and call it improvement. They remove agency and call it peace. The Borg, Worf says, voice approving as if the word is a target in a pistol range. Yes, the Emperor says. They have met me before in wars that did not happen here. They adjust fast. They will return with a wound specifically for me. Geordie shifts in his seat. Anti-psi, he says, or something like it. A null, or something conceptual, Troy says, voice small and sharp. A message that only he hears. Q appears atop the table like a centerpiece at a dinner party that ran out of manners. Finally, he says, folding his chin into his hands. We're past introductions. Q, Picard murmurs, a growl with etiquette. You are audible when you sneer, Jean-Luc, Q says. He looks at the Emperor. They are very proud of their toys. They will build a new one for you. It will hum at a frequency that eats your particular vanity. The Emperor tilts his head. Which vanity do you think is mine? You believe you can teach even hives to be free, Q says, amused and almost fond. And maybe you can. The bill will be appalling. We do not pay our debts with other people's lives, Picard says, not soft. Speak for yourself, Section 31 murmurs. The Vulcan lifts an eyebrow a millimeter. He speaks for the Federation, she says. You speak for necessity. Both are true. Neither alone suffices. The room holds a pause and then releases it. Nechayev looks thinner and stronger than she did an hour ago. War Council, for the record, she says. With praise and with anxieties. The Emperor saved lives and damaged subspace. He helped us prototype a brace that reduces the damage. We can coordinate to mitigate risk. We will not assume his presence is a net good or a net danger. We will measure. We will also prepare for a new Borg tactic designed specifically to target our ally. She glances at Picard. What will you need, Captain, to kill that tactic? A chance to study it before it kills us, Picard says. He gets his chance faster than a man likes chances. An hour later, Enterprise streaks past Mercury, escorted by the Ajax and 3 smaller ships that carry more heart than hull. The brace corridor hums like a tuned string. The Emperor moves within it like a large man walking carefully through a hospital ward. Dispatches whisper along the fleet, stabilizations, gratitude. A child's drawing attached to a form letter, a yard schedule already rewritten 3 times. Then the space between Venus and Earth winks with a shape that isn't a ship. It is a geometry that does not occupy volume so much as claim an argument. A cube that is not the Borg style. A cube made of absence, blacker than black, with edges that hum in his bones. Contact, Worf says. No warp signature, no impulse trail, no thermal. It is an absence broadcasting coordinates. An Iconian gate harmonics profile. Data says, brow subtly drawn, but corrupted. This signal is braided with a pattern we have only seen in Borg transmissions, a queen node. On the main display, static freckles itself into a face made of nothing and intent. A woman's cheekbones and a hive's eyes. The Borg Queen's voice arrives across every frequency, and inside none. You taught us a smell, she says, and it is almost kind. We like it. Picard feels the deck cold under his feet. Queen. Captain, she says, and the syllables slick over him like old oil. I have come to thank your ally. He brought a richness into your space. We have always been hungry. The Emperor steps forward inside nothing, because that is where he stands best. You would put a chain on every wrist, he says. You would call it unity. You are a poor student of personhood. Teach me, she says. Come into my gate. Bring your fire. I have prepared a house for it. The cube of absence vibrates. Space near it behaves like a dirty mirror. The brace groans. Back us off, Picard says. Do not approach that gate. It is not a gate, the Emperor says softly. It is a blade. The blade swings without moving. Subspace ripples like skin under a cold wind. The corridor shakes. The Emperor staggers half a step in a place where he does not have to move at all. He looks down. A thin line cuts across the palm of his mind and bleeds light. Status, Beverly snaps. Subspace resonance is being pulled toward the object, Data says. It is hungry. It is not simply absorbing energy. It is digesting pattern. It is removing coherence from the medium itself. Geordie's voice goes through a note that hurts him to make. That thing is eating the road. Shields, Riker says. Effective against energy, Worf says. I do not know if we can shield against subtraction. Emperor, Picard says. Can you close it? Yes, he says. At a cost I will not pay near this many lives. Then we kill the scaffolding, Riker says. Shoot the frame, that Iconian skeleton. The Emperor nods once. He does the thing that makes even Q pay attention. He lowers his presence to a needle. He threads that needle through the blade's frame, not touching the hungry edges, and catches a piece of its scaffolding where it believes no hand can reach. He pulls, he tears. The frame screams like a city made of strings. Enterprise fires into the scream. Ajax fires with that pride a smaller ship has when it stands next to a legend and refuses to be less. The blade's edges wilt. The Queen's face smiles and then frowns as if she misspoke. The gate collapses. The corridor shivers. The lattice flares, then dims. Collateral, Picard asks, not breathing until he can. Minimal, Data says. We have a transporter blackout zone for 147 seconds. Warp suppression within 3 AUs for approximately 10 minutes. No civilian vessels within critical range. First victory, Riker says under his breath. Small price. Nechaev's voice comes over tight band. Good work. Prepare for round 2. The Emperor does not answer on the channel because he is counting. The cut on his palm of mind stings and does not stop. The Queen knew where to place the blade. Not on his skin, but on his cohesion with this medium. The next blade will be longer. It will be smarter. It will be patient. They reconvene with speed. War Council again, this time on Enterprise, because ships are where important talking should happen, when the stars are being opinionated. Holograms present for out-system voices. Riker in command presence. Worf bristling with theories. Geordie already running simulations with half his brain and making coffee with the other half. The Emperor stands near the railing above the ops pit, as if he has chosen a small mountain again. We have proof of concept, Picard says. We can break their blades by hitting the frame. We can mitigate collateral by using the brace corridors and by choosing our battle space. Praise, Nechaev says. Now anxieties. The blade hurt him. Describe the wound, the Vulcan says, looking at the Emperor with a clinician's regard for precision, not cruelty. It took a slice of my coherence with your subspace, he says. It did not wound my flesh or my mind. It cut the handshake. If they increase the pressure or catch me where I must hold and cannot fold, I will. Be less. Less what? Riker says. Less myself, he says. He looks at Picard's hands. You have felt this, when they borrowed your hands. Picard nods once, as if to an executioner who asks if the chains are too tight and will not loosen them anyway. Why mercy? Section 31 asks, sharp like a pocket knife. Why not annihilate them when you had the chance? One glorious cut, as you said. End the cube. End the Queen in our space. Because of the bill, the Emperor says. You would be stranded in your own sky. Your colonies would starve slow. Your kindnesses would rot in your mouths while you ate rations and told your children stories of the days when ships came when called. Exaggeration, the man says, because it cost him nothing to say it. Projection. 31.9% probability of contiguous subspace lane collapse across the inner system in the event of a full lattice sever, Data says. Famine and logistical failure would ensue. Dr. Crusher's department would be busy. Thank you, Mr. Data, Picard says. He looks at the black-suited man with all the patience he has built over years of shouting quietly. We will not win by unmaking the ground we stand on. The Vulcan inclines her head toward the Emperor. You made a decision under constraint, she says. We can work with such decisions. They are the shape of ethics under conditions. Speaking of ethics, Troy says, meeting the Emperor's gaze with eyes that do not flinch. Why are you here? Why do you choose us? Because you still argue about kindness, as if it is not obvious, he says with a small smile that has grief in it. Because you make laws as if they are a craft, and not simply assertions by the powerful. Because your sky can be taught to be hard without becoming cruel. And because you can't not, Q says, bored and intimate at once. He is duty in boots. He cannot walk past a war and leave it unmended. True enough, the Emperor says. He does not bristle. Admitting a bias is not weakness. It is table setting. The door chimes and opens before Picard answers, because the ship knows when a conversation needs seasoning. Guinan steps in, quiet as a night shift ending. She holds nothing and many things in the curve of her mouth and the angle of her hat eye. Dr. Crusher, she says lightly, you still brewing tea that could dissolve hull plating? Only for people who deserve it, Beverly shoots back, relieved by this distraction that is not. Guinan looks up at the Emperor and sees him as a person sees a storm, acknowledging the grandeur and planning where to put the buckets. I've seen men try to save everyone, she says. They forget to save themselves, and then they don't save anyone. He meets her gaze with a little bow, not performative, just enough. I accept the warning. Good, she says. Now let's talk about mercy and survival like grown-ups. They do. They steel man both sides because this ship is a monastery for honest argument. Worf opens with the survival. Mercy invites predators, he says. We temper it with steel or we are prey. Mercy refuses to let enemies make us into them. Troy counters. Not airy, only accurate. We temper it with lines and consequences. We do not abandon it because it is costly. Mercy can be strategic, Geordi says. We leave a wounded cube alive and watch how it limps. We study, we prepare. We learn to heal the road while under fire. Mercy is not the same as indulgence, the Vulcan adds. Indulgence is illogical attachment to ideals without regard to realities. Mercy is the choice to bear a cost to preserve a value. Survival lets you keep your values, the Section 31 man says. You can live to argue ethics if you live at all. We cut throats now and feel bad later. Later arrives, Picard says. And then you discover that the throats you cut were your own. The Emperor listens and does not interrupt the people he chose to love. When they finish, he speaks without the pomp of his title. I will answer your predators, he says. I will answer with minimum force. I will strike first when intel says it saves more than it costs. I will not make a field of bones and call it a victory. Then I will not put you in a box and call it safety, Picard says. Nechayev watches them and sees a shape she can live with. Not comfortable, not complete, enough. Situational doctrine, she says, tapping notes. We codify. Use of Emperor's lattice interaction, allowed only within braced corridors and away from high-density transit unless exigency. Starfleet retains tactical lead. Emperor retains autonomy to protect civilian lives when immediate. Notification mandatory. Review after action. Acceptable, the Vulcan says. Unenforceable, Section 31 says. And then smiles because saying it is the first step to making it untrue. The alarm interrupts them. Not a klaxon, not drama, just Data's voice because reality does not need to shout. Captain, he says over internal, we are receiving a signal from the dark side of Luna. It is not Starfleet. It is not civilian. It is archaic. And it is repeating the Emperor's title. They go to the observation lounge on Deck 10, where space looks like a painting, and you can think in bigger shapes. The signal streams like an old hymn sung through a throat full of static. Emperor, Emperor, Protector. It is not a call. It is a mirror. What am I looking at? Picard asks, already feeling the shape of a snare. An Iconian gate remnant, Data says. But this one is not hungry. It is a doorway into an absence. And within that absence I detect a cognitive pattern. It matches. He looks at the Emperor. It matches your signature at 17.2%. Mirror foe, Q says, approving as if the game just produced a particularly pretty piece. They are so quick when they have a scent. They made a U. The Emperor stands very still. No, he says quietly. They made an argument that looks like me. He closes his eyes. I can feel the offer. Speak it aloud, Guinan says. He opens his eyes, and his voice sounds like a man repeating something he has been told, delicately refusing to accept it and still giving it time. They promise an optimization. They promise a version of me without doubt. They say doubt is an inefficiency. They say hesitation kills. They say they have seen my wars and my costs, and they can remove the parts that ache. Riker's mouth goes tight. That sounds like a pathology with a press kit. They will call it love, Q says. They will tell him he can love better if he is simpler. Do not approach, Picard says, because men who know bills know the difference between a loan and a gift. We study at range. Mr. Worf, battle stations at condition 2. Geordie, can we throw a net? We can, Geordie says, already inventing a net with lines of math that have never been knotted this way before. We'll need the brace, and we'll need him to anchor it. I will stand, the Emperor says. Smarter foe, Troy whispers to herself. Able to hurt him conceptually. Power scaling, interlude, and one. The Borg cannot beat him by force alone. They build tools that subtract cohesion instead of heat. Their Iconian braided frame turns subspace into a solvent for identity, targeting the handshake between mind and medium. A mirror argument, a perfected Emperor, lures him toward the null, where doubt cannot live. If he accepts, he becomes the blade. The limit is his need to choose. The weapon punishes choice itself. He must fight while refusing the clarity that would make victory easy but monstrous. They move. The net is a geometry that respects both physics and will. Enterprise and Ajax and 2 squat Norway-class ships at the corners, their deflectors tuned to frequencies that sing no to subtraction. The brace corridor hums louder, not frantic, just present. The gate remnant flexes, pleased with itself for being clever and hungry and old. The mirror speaks. It does not look like him because it doesn't need to. It feels like ease. Let me carry the doubt. It whispers inside only his sense. Let me be the hard part. You be the love. I will make the choices that hurt. You will be the hand that heals. Temptation, Guinan says, looking into a dark none of them can see. Tailored. I refuse, the Emperor says. A small answer that contains a mountain. He doesn't roar. He steps back. He lets the doubt hurt. It makes him heavier, and that makes him more here. The mirror tries to pull. The net stretches. The corridor sings. The Emperor doesn't push, he holds. It's a very hard thing holding, when you can push and end it. He does the difficult version. The gate shudders once, twice, like a breath failing. The frame shows its Iconian bones, and Geordi puts a torpedo right into a rib of nothing and breaks it. The absence collapses. The mirror's voice abrades into silence like a tide making a promise it cannot keep. Control collateral? Picard asks again. Because you never stop counting. Transporters flickered for 90 seconds, Data says. We have a residual dulling of subspace response near Luna. Nothing permanent. Warp lanes unaffected. Good, Picard says. He's sweating and he didn't notice. He wipes his brow like a human being, and not a captain, and no one thinks less of him. The Emperor's shoulders lower a fraction. Q hops off the table and for once does not clap. They will try again, he says. They always do. This is not checkmate. This is, they call it, a positional advantage. We'll fortify that position, Picard says. We'll turn it into doctrine. Mr. LaForge, make that net reproducible. Mr. Worf, train it into the fleet. Counselor, please draft a communication to the public that is honest and does not cause panic. He looks at the Emperor, and his eyes are better than any leash. Rest if you can. I can't, the Emperor says, but he means it politely. He looks out at Earth. There are so many windows that need light to find them. They disperse to do small things that are the only real things. Picard signs a casualty report. Beverly squeezes a mother's shoulder and lies about certainty with art and ethics. Geordi sends a message to the shop on Deck 17, asking them to keep making those odd, ugly support struts, because he will be installing them all week. Worf runs a drill and makes a joke no one will admit they liked. Troy writes a speech about fear that is actually about courage. The Section 31. Man steps into a side corridor and calls a man whose face is a fog. You see the shape? He says. I see the leash we can sell, the fog answers. But not yet. Let the captain think he owns it. The Vulcan hears them as she passes and says nothing, because saying nothing now will produce a better outcome than saying something, and she is not paid to be theatrical. Night on Earth again. In a small apartment 2 blocks from Starfleet Medical, a nurse watches the news and then turns it off and bakes bread, because that is a thing that makes people strong across time. On the Enterprise observation deck, Guinan pours tea that won't dissolve hull plating and sits with a man who once had another name and a cube in his mouth. Afraid? She asks. Not of the Borg, Picard says. Of how easy it is to be grateful to a man like him in a way that becomes abdication. Then don't abdicate, she says. Share the steering wheel. He can handle a lot. You handle the rest. I'll try. You'll fail sometimes, she says. And then you'll try again. He smiles. Yes. The alarm that follows does not sound like danger. It sounds like a song. The Bajoran wormhole opens with a light that is not a tearing, not hungry, an invitation. The air on the bridge tastes like old spice and new rain. The prophets are not gods and also not gods. They are a conversation out of time about time, and they have decided to send a postcard. On the main viewer, not stars but a river. An eddy in the river. A voice that is not a voice. A sense of a hand on a child's head. A blessing that is also a map. Emissary, the feeling says. And for a moment there is a station shaped like a circle with arms and a man with a baseball on his desk. But that is not now. There is a new tide. The Emperor turns his head and listens to beings that do not listen in chains. He respects them because they are not Imperial but still stern. I will not cut your sky, he says, not aloud. The river flares, a sign in the light. A path through the dark that is not the brace corridor and not his and not theirs. A safe place to step when the blade comes again. It is a gift with a condition. He bows exactly as much as a peer bows, and no more. The wormhole closes. Q appears and pretends he is not a tiny bit spooked. They disapprove of me, he says. I approve of their taste. Picard rests his hands on the back of the command chair. We have allies, he says quietly, and rules, and enemies with knives. Then we write our own, the Emperor says. His eyes are tired. He does not pretend otherwise. They do not get a day. 3 probes slither from transwarp gashes at the edge of Saturn's rings and cut toward the brace corridor like spilled ink. Each carries a sliver of the null blade. They intend to sing together and carve a song through the Emperor's handshake with this sky. Positions, Picard orders. Keep them from chorus. Divide. Deny. The net goes up. The brace sings. The fleet moves as if they have been doing this for years, which is how Starfleet fights once it learns a shape. The Emperor anchors where he softly asks the prophets to let him anchor. The probes pulse, sink, and are shoved 3 ways by tractor beams that work because of a harmonic. Only Geordie saw at 4 in the morning, looking at a model he hated. Phasers flick. 1 probe breaks and dies like a broken promise. The second wobbles and collapses its blade in on itself and swallows a taste of its own hunger and hates that feeling. The third tries to run and finds the Emperor's open hand, which he closes very gently. The subspace cost is measurable and tolerable. Data calls the numbers. Picard says the numbers out loud and does not hide the tremor in his voice, because truth needs to sound like itself. Nice work, Riker says, as if he is talking to a baton a conductor just used to hold a symphony together. The Queen speaks once more, not angry, only curious. You refuse the easy version of yourself, she says. Why? Because love is not efficient, the Emperor says. Because survival without the soul is just a longer death. She hums, as if she files the phrase for later. Then the channel is clean. It is worse than gloating when enemies are clinical. It means they will come back with instruments. They hold the line for another hour. Then they stand down because humans cannot be taught forever. Riker releases the bridge to the night watch. Beverly orders crew to sleep. Worf prowls the corridors like a shepherd disguised as a wolf. Troy sits with a young ensign who shook and did not run. Picard writes a letter to a family and deletes it and writes it again and sends it. The Emperor goes to a small room with a low ceiling and sits. He looks huge, and then he looks exactly the size of a man who is tired. The door opens and Picard stands there with 2 mugs. One smells terrible. Tea, Picard offers. I drink it when others do, the Emperor says, taking the mug with careful hands and large fingers that could break steel and instead cradle ceramic. They drink. Silence. Then Picard. You know what frightens me about you? Yes, the Emperor says. He could guess wrong and chooses not to. Say it anyway. You make it feel easier to be good, Picard says. And that's dangerous, because goodness should be a choice, not a gravity well. The Emperor studies the liquid that tastes like plants and duty. I am not a gravity well, he says. I am an example. If I become a gravity well, push away. I will, Picard says. He means it. And I will obey, the Emperor says. He means it too. And that is the strangest and most comforting thing about him. The ship hums around them, alive and loyal, a home with its own etiquette. They sit like brothers who met on a battlefield and found neither had a knife behind their back. The next alarm is not the Queen. It is a whisper from deep space, past Pluto, where an asteroid carries a wound like a mouth. A graveyard of an ancient war. They catalogued it 3 years ago and forgot it. It is awake now. The whisper rides the lattice like a flea on a dog, tiny, then everywhere. It is Iconian. It is not Borg. It is a different intelligence asking the same question. May I borrow your roads? No, Picard says out of reflex, and then builds a protocol around the word. We lock that place down. We get a science team. We get a spiritual team. We get him. They go. The asteroid is a ruin the size of a small city. Its tunnels are smooth. Its doors open to nowhere. The Emperor walks in first, not out of arrogance, but because if the floor falls out, it should fall under him. Worf follows, because it is his job to follow danger. Data follows because he wishes to understand. Beverly follows to pick up what remains, which is sometimes everyone. The heart of the place is a gate like a throat. It looks bone pale. It has not been touched by human hands, and also it has. Someone was here once who thought hand differently. The whisper hisses like water boiled with a plague. It is offering a deal, Data says, head cocked, listening to signals no one else can. We can stabilize the lattice if we let it run a weave for us that is old and hostile to improvisation. Hard roads, the Emperor says. With tolls I won't pay. Worf's phaser is already up, though nothing visible moves. Captain, he says, recommend we destroy this site. It is too tempting. Temptation is not a sin in our doctrine, Picard says gently. It is a test. We will not run away from every test. The test erupts. The gate belches a shape like a dog sculpted from algebra. It moves through dimensions like a man changing lanes and snaps at the Emperor's cohesion, not his arm. He steps aside in will, not feet. It snaps air. It catches the place where he might have been if he had been someone less accustomed to blades pretending to be questions. Worf fires, because a snap is a snap regardless of who is doing the snarling. The blast passes through the creature like light through thought. Data skews 3 centimeters to the left and fires at the reflection. It yelps because even thought has a reflection. The Emperor opens his hand and shows the creature an image. A road that stays a road because people walk it together. The creature bites the image, finds no meat, and retreats an inch. He does not press the advantage because you do not corner a thing that is made of back corners. Geordie, Picard says over the open line, can you build me a dampener for... He looks at the Emperor. This conceptual bite. I can build you a conceptual raincoat, Geordie says in the kind of voice a man uses when he's going to try anyway. Don't get wet while I invent it. They fall back in good order. The Emperor seals the gate not by crushing it, but by convincing the room it chooses to be closed. He bleeds more from the wound the null blade made. He keeps his face composed because faces are how comfort is communicated among creatures that read eyes before equations. We can't keep playing whack-a-mole with ancient ruins and clever hives, Riker mutters when they are back on the bridge. We need doctrine plus prophylaxis. We'll get both, Picard says. We have a world to defend and a warp network to keep breathing. We now have a list. Braced corridors, net deployment, blade frame targeting, conceptual dampeners, and we have a patient whose pride is not the kind that blows up neighbors. Thank you, the Emperor says, faintly amused. The hours pass. The list grows. They turn first victory into a set of habits. They turn anxieties into checklists, because that is how you keep fear from being in charge. And then the alarm that is worse than all others, the kind that isn't. There is no beep. There is a sentence. It arrives in every ship and at every desk, where a person who loves a starship keeps a picture of a family. Omega detected, it says. Starfleet encryptions unlock themselves because the word orders them to. The map paints a dot in deep system near Neptune's trailing Lagrange point, where nothing useful ever happens. Omega, Geordie says, throat dry. Not a scar. The molecule. It will make roads into rubble. Data says. Who brought it? Picard asks, already knowing. The Queen answers. You, she says, meaning the Emperor. You taught us the flavor. We cooked. Come eat. The room looks at the Emperor. He looks at his hands again and does not flinch from his reflection. I will not destroy it, he says. I will not cut down a forest to kill one predator you lured into it. Then we die, Section 31 says, delighted by the clarity of death. No, Picard says. We contain. Containment is a song they sing quickly. Starfleet's classified protocol is bare bones but clear. Isolate, neutralize, obliterate subspace. It assumes you don't care about collateral. They care, they adjust. They build a gossamer bag and a wall of brass around it because both are needed. They go. The dot at Neptune is a tremble in the air. The molecule is a ghost and a god. It wants to be many of itself, and then all of itself, and then only itself. It is the opposite of laws and also their consequence. Geordie, Picard says, your raincoat. We haven't had time to stitch all the seams, Geordie says, but we can get you a tarp. He brings the deflector up into a set of frequencies no one has tried before, because the idea didn't exist until an hour ago. Ready. The Emperor steps into the tarp, into the bag, into the wall. He looks like a god and feels like a mason. He wraps the song in a not song and hums a note that cancels nothing and holds everything. It takes all of him in a way that does not destroy him, but reminds him that being as large as he is was not an accident. It was a decision. The Omega cluster trembles and calms. It becomes a thought inside a glass mind. It waits. The Queen's voice sighs, a little pleased. You see, we are good students. Your problem is not insufficient education, he says, sweating light. It is contempt. He does not annihilate the cluster. He does not hold it forever. He does something else. He hands it to the Prophet's map and lets it go. Where time is not a straight line, the wormhole opens for a breath and closes. The cluster is gone. Collateral. Data calls it like a priest intones a litany. Transporters offline in Sol for 17 minutes. Warp capacity reduction across inner system by 12% for 40 hours. No civilian ships trapped. A refueling convoy near Ganymede is delayed by 3 hours. 3 hours, Picard repeats. He has never loved a small number more. The Queen goes silent. Not defeated, thinking. It is worse. The price is written in the Emperor's bones. He feels less. He does not look smaller. He is. It will not be obvious to anyone who does not know him. Q knows him. Q makes himself not gloat. You bled well, Q says softly. I bled enough, the Emperor says. They return to Earth's sky. They do not celebrate, they write. They make a doctrine with holes in it, because reality wears holes like jewelry. Nechayev signs a provisional order that reads like a poem only to people who like poems about fuel lines and railroads and human promises. Picard sleeps for an hour and dreams of a field. The Emperor stands on the field and refuses to be a scarecrow and refuses to be a post. He is just a man. It is more than enough and not enough, and exactly what is required. The last note of the act arrives in the shape of an invitation, not an alarm. A quiet voice in rooms that have no doors. A call from a place that is not a place. The Q continuum clears its throat across a gallery that is also a road and says very politely, attend. Q smiles without teeth. Field trip, he says. Wear your nicest crown. The Emperor looks at Picard. I will go, he says. Of course, Picard says. We'll go with you as far as we can. As far as you can is far enough, the Emperor says. And somewhere under that bridge, the child who called him Angel tells the water a story about a man in gold who refused an easy way and saved a road. The water keeps it and spends it and makes it true. The map on the table is not paper or hologram. It is a living model of subspace over soul, colored like bruise and lightning. Threads mark brace corridors. Red motes mark places where the lattice aches. Data drives the display with a pianist's precision. Geordi annotates with a mechanic's honesty. Their goal is not conquest of soul, Picard says, voice steady. They want a sample. Of him, Riker says. Of his handshake with this medium, the Vulcan adds. If they can simulate it, they can weaponize it. They will create localized nulls, Data says. Not energy denial, but cohesion subtraction. Standard shields are designed for energy management. They will fail. Our counters must be conceptual or geometric. Frames, Geordi says, sketching with his fingers. A cube made of nothing that still throws a shadow. They braid Iconian gate bones with Borgic control nodes, then hang the null on that skeleton. You can't shoot the null. You break the skeleton. We built nets, Worf says. Braced corridors, dampeners. Training is underway across the fleet. Insufficient alone, the Section 31 man says. They will press him outside your little lanes and soar. Picard does not look at him. So we lure them where we can bear the cost. Where, Beverly says. No colonies live downwind of our decisions. The Emperor watches the model and listens without practice to fear that is not cowardice and anger that is not cruelty. He hears form. He hears a world trying to remain itself. Why do standard counters fail? Nechayev asks. Because ours are force, Geordi says. Theirs is subtraction. You can't stop a hole with more hole. You must make a shape around it. And because our doctrine assumes enemies who want territory, Troy adds. The Borg want you. And if they can't have you, they want your shadow. Q lies on the conference table with his chin in his hands, uninvited and unavoidable. You'll get your jewel, he says, eyes on the golden man. You love them. I do not love glory, the Emperor says. That's what you all say before you dance, Q purrs. He is correct about the timing. The call arrives not by comm but by absence. Space near Neptune curdles into a cube of not quite there and hums at exactly the frequency that hurts the Emperor's wound. The Queen speaks without face, without favor. Prime, come. Not near Mars, Picard says. Not near Earth. We choose a killing ground. He nods to Data. Plot an approach vector to the heliopause. Form up with Thunderchild, Ajax, Sargon. Understood, Data says. Stars crawl. The brace corridors light like runway lamps. Stay within the lanes, Geordi says. Please. The Emperor places a hand on the rail as Enterprise leans. He can feel the roads give. He cannot feel the warp scream. This sky is polite even when it aches. He likes it for that. They arrive at a darkness far from human windows. Dust hangs old and slow. The cube of absence is there, not moving, singing a frequency that unthreads doubt. The fleet drops into a looser net. The Emperor steps into void, not touching the lattice, choosing to be present less than he can be. Captain, Riker says low. He goes alone. No one fights alone on my bridge, Picard says. But in shape, yes. The Queen condenses into a shape because people like faces. She wears the body of a woman who knows what hands are. Her eyes are a hive. Her voice is velvet over grating steel. You smell different, she says to him. We admire variety. Variety is not chaos, he says. Unity is not theft. Unity is efficiency, she purrs. Your efficiencies will save thousands, perhaps millions. Your efficiencies will delete them. You delete them when you hesitate. Her frame flexes. Subspace around her goes glossy and thin. The Emperor steps closer because retreat concedes the terms of the duel. He keeps himself needle thin. He refuses to write in the sky. Phaser arcs bite the frame's corners. Torpedoes blossom at joints of nothing. The Ajax threads toothpicks into shadows. The skeleton adapts. Its bones, not bones, but options. Worf curses softly. The Queen has been studying. Brace strain rising, Geordi says. Hold your shape, big guy. The Queen opens a channel that is not a channel and pours a voice only he hears. It tastes like expedience and mercy braided wrong. You will make hard choices, she whispers. I will carry the burden. You can be the hand that heals. I am the hand that holds, he says aloud. Then hold this, she says, and draws the null like a soft knife across his wound. He takes it on his left side, where the earlier subtraction left a tender absence. The knife does not cut skin. It cuts handshake. His coherence with this medium, the way his will sits in subspace, slides a half-inch off true. He stumbles in a place where a thought is a footstep. The lattice flashes. Transporters across 2 task ships hiccup hard enough to make medics swear. Report, Picard snaps. Transporter pattern drift in Sagan's Bay, Data says. Injuries, no fatalities. Keep those beams cold, Beverly says. No one dematerializes until we say. The Emperor plants. He takes the knife out by refusing to agree with its premise. He lets doubt sing inside him, loud. Doubt is pain and restraint and moral accounting. It makes him heavier here. The blade sulks, as if licking itself. The Queen changes questions. The frame extrudes a facet that is also a door. From the door walks a man wearing Picard's face and a crown of wires, calm as a winter field. His voice is not the Queen's. It is the voice of a soldier who surrendered his name in exchange for certainty. Locutus Ascendant, he says, introducing himself without flourish. Prime, the Federation thrives under a firm hand. Accept nodehood, delegate volition, retain benevolence, optimize. Riker curses without volume. Picard's hands go cold around a railing he has used to outweight fear. Troy's nails bite her palm, and that is a deliberate choice. Q claps once in delight and then stops, because this is art and rudeness is for lesser performances. Temptation, Gwennon says softly, unseen because she is in 10 forward and truth reads over distance. Tailored. Incorrect, Locutus says, pivoting to face the golden man with that gentle pity tyrants reserve for peers. Mercy and survival are not opposed. You choose both. Only indecision kills. Upload your burden. We will carry it. What is the price? The Emperor asks. None, Locutus says. Lies always bill late, the Emperor says. Locutus takes a step forward, and the null moves with him, a tide that sands a shoreline down. You could save them all, he says. Images spill in the Emperor's mind, perfect and cheap. Famine graphs that never exist. Cubes turned to museums by a thought. Children who never learn fear. Let me remove your variants. Let me use you. I refuse, the Emperor says, and pays to say it. Refusal is a cut. He feels the wound deepen. He still refuses. Worf fires at the facet that projects the not Picard's. The frame greedily eats the energy. The gun blossoms gold in his hands from heat, and he laughs once, shocked and delighted, because laughing at a weapon is how Klingons remind fear who is in charge. Break the joints, Geordi yells, already doing it. Ajax, 50 microdegrees starboard. Thunderchild, change your phaser polarity right now. Data, feed them the new sequence. Now. Beams lance not at absence, but at the resonant nodes holding absence dressed as geometry. The skeleton stutters. The facet flickers. Locutus still smiles. He is very convincing. He is a picture of a yes printed atop a no. The Emperor shapes his right hand into geometry without laying it on the sky. He knits a thought that refuses subtraction. He cups the next null slice and holds it without killing it. He lets it tell him what it is made of. Iconian braiding, Borgic control, a humming at the same pitch as Q's annoyance when civilizations dress hubris in robes. He understands enough to break fingers without breaking the hand. He grabs a joint and twists. The frame snows shards of metaphor. The Queen's voice rises a half tone, bemused. "You are very good." "I have practice," he says, and throws one of the shards where the frame can least afford it. Locutus leans in, not to strike, not to soothe, to persuade. If your mercy causes deaths, it is not mercy. If your survival is bought with ruin, it is not survival. Choose the strong version. Be efficient. Efficiency is not love, the Emperor says. It is a virtue in service, not a master. Your religion will cost you, Locutus says, and is correct. The null flexes like a muscle. It plows through the Emperor's left shoulder, not touching flesh, stripping adhesion to the medium another fraction. He keeps his posture. He sends the pain down a well beneath his will. He does not hide the flinch in his eyes because men who never flinch are lying. Ajax loses a nacelle to a beam that learns hate. Fire crawls across her belly, blue and white, and then out. Casualties, Data says. Containment successful. Keep the corridor intact, Picard orders. If we lose the brace, we lose the fight. On it, Geordi says. He says it through teeth. The deflector stack glows dangerous and honest. Worf roars as he forces a firing solution through a knot of subtraction and carves a scar in the frame. Thunderchild punches photons into the wound like medicine. The skeleton shakes. Pull your frame back, Picard tells the Queen, or we will cut it until your toys wear you. You will not kill the Prime, she says, and it is affection. He will come to us when he cannot bear to choose. Do not presume, Picard says, rough. He does not presume, the Emperor says, because a man should not let his friends waste courage on needless insults. He closes his hand over nothing and makes the gesture of breaking a blade. This time he does not press. He yields, and the blade slides past the organ it wanted. Locutus's crown dims. His eyes lift towards some faraway arithmetic. We can do this without you, he says. You cannot do it without me, the Queen corrects, and the frame retracts with a shudder. The net holds. The brace screams. The jewel bothers subspace hard enough that Jupiter feels it in its bones. The Emperor stands where he put himself and bleeds light that only people who know how to read kindness can see. He snatches one last shard and stamps it out. The frame collapses. The null flicks off like a sneer that runs out of breath. Codex note. Subtraction weapons cut the interface between agency and medium. Refusing their premise by admitting doubt increases anchor weight. But the resisting will loses coherence and recovers slowly, unless re-anchored by an external constancy. The silence afterward is not triumph. It is the humiliating brag of exhausted systems that did not die. Breaths are counted. The crews of 3 ships call roll. People say, "Here," like prayer. Injuries, Beverly asks. 51 moderate, Data says. 12 severe, no fatalities. Ajax lists and catches herself. Her captain says steady, like a promise she fulfills. Prime, the Queen says, and she sounds almost curious, as if she has just discovered a new note in music. Your refusal is an inefficiency with high aesthetic value. We will study it. Please don't, Riker mutters. Retreat vector, Worf says. They are already gone, Data answers. No transwarp aperture detected. They did not come here to harvest. They came to tune. Us, Geordi says, sick. They tuned us. And me, the Emperor says. He does not reach for his shoulder where the subtraction went. He knows how much not to show. He will not pretend for the people who must choose tomorrow. They limp to the rendezvous at the edge of braced space. Transporters cough back to life in fits. The net endures. The lattice aches like weather. In 10 forward, Guinan pours tea and watchful silence. Picard joins her, jaw tired. He does not ask for forgiveness for living. He has learned to stop framing survival like a confession. He's hurt, she says. Yes. Don't ask him what it cost, she says. Tell him what it saved. He nods like a man shown where to put his gratitude. They hold a quiet council in a small room with low ceilings and terrible chairs. Beverly's idea, and correct. Good decisions are made when backs hurt a little. Nechayev joins by secure channel. Window on a wall that acts like a window. The Vulcan is there, present like a calm metronome. Section 31 smear of a man leans against the wall with polite hunger. We kept the road, Picard says. We kept our people. We learned a pattern. And you bled, Nechayev says. Not cruel. Yes, the Emperor says. I will bleed again. This pattern. Geordi draws it in the air without asking permission. A curl in subspace where the null bites. The frame's join points. The frequency where the dampener sings best. We can teach this. We can turn this into drills. We can cut their time advantage. They will evolve, Data says calmly. Our adaptation will transiently edge them. Then they will move. They will move faster when they make him simpler, Section 31 says. He looks at the Emperor with an entrepreneur's eye measuring a machine. We can help you bear the cost. Sit down, Beverly says. Too sweet to be safe. He does not. He smiles instead. We can partition you. We can install bridalware. You keep your liberties. We shunt the stress into design channels, reduce systemic damage. Imagine a crown of restraint. We will call it whatever you like. Q chokes on air he does not need. Oh, that's cute, he says. They brought you a leash and monogrammed it. Get out, Picard says. Make me, he says offhand, then sighs. Fine. He is not gone exactly. He is simply less obvious. The Emperor inclines his head toward the black suit. You believe your solution is kindness, he says. It is convenience. I will not partition my will. I am not a weapon that misfires when carried by a child. Refusal noted, the man says, keeping his contempt behind his teeth. The Vulcan looks between them. He should not accept, she says. But it is logical to acknowledge the need your proposal attempts to meet. We must develop protocols that offload stress without touching his agency. Then build machines, the Emperor says, almost gentle. I will lean on them. And we will build habits, Troy says. That is how people lean. They disperse. Picard studies casualty reports alone for a moment, and then closes the file because he refuses to turn grief into a to-do list. He looks up at the ceiling and speaks as if to a friend who lives in the crawl spaces. We need a judge, he says. Not a jury, not a committee. Someone to set operating rules that aren't ours. I heard, Q says, appearing as if he has always been there. He wears no costume. We sent the invitation. You would put him on trial, Picard says softly. We put civilizations on trial, Q says. He is a civilization when he walks. What will it cost? Everything, Q says, and means the things he does not want to give up. It will also prevent you from breaking your toys. Then do it. Q turns toward the golden man, who is standing at a viewport, very obvious about not leaning. Come, he says, not making fun of anyone for once. Bring your captain. Bring your ethics. Leave your weapons. The Emperor's eyes close for a heartbeat. He hears another voice beneath Q's, a river that talks in circles and still goes forward. The wormhole sings in a key he cannot ignore. Reach the throne, the current says, and does not specify which. They go as far as a human can go. The Enterprise tilts into a place that pretends to be a road in New Orleans, then a battlefield at dawn, then a courtroom with no walls and 9 benches that are also doors. The Continuum wears skins for guests. Q guides them with a host's disdain for chairs. Supreme authority, Riker says. Wry because humor keeps men from cracking in awe. The closest thing you'll get, Q says. Before the trial begins, there is one more knife. It comes from nowhere near. It comes from everywhere in clever timing. The Queen cannot enter this room. She rings the lattice outside instead. A null wave ripples down the brace corridor at Luna like a hand dragging across the surface of a pool. A shuttle en route to a hospital flickers. Transporters are down. The shuttle begins to tumble. Geordie, Picard barks over a channel that should not exist here, and does, because Q allows it. Get me a tractor on that shuttle. Now. We're not aligned, Geordie says, swearing because good men swear when physics refuses. I can give you a pulse. The Emperor steps out of the Continuum the way a man steps into the aisle at a theatre to take a call. He sets his palm against a patch of sky that is a replicated sliver of soul and accepts the ache. He does not weave a lattice. He does not brace the medium. He reaches for the shuttle and convinces it to be kind to itself. Its tumble unwinds. Its nose comes around. Its pilot finds purchase on a sensation that feels like a strong hand under the keel. The Continuum watches him spend. They are judges who have learned not to flinch when men do noble harm. The shuttle steadies. The null wave passes. The bill is carved deeper in the Emperor's left side, where coherence should sit. He does not show it to anyone but the room that is also a road. Enough, a voice says from everywhere at once, weary and amused. We will set rules. You will obey. Or you can go home and hope your home never learns the flavor of this place. That is not an option, the Emperor says. Set your rules. You will be heard, Q says. He almost bows. They wait for judgment. Waiting in this place is different. It lasts no time and all the time. A string pulled taut between obligation and confession. Picard stands at the bar and speaks not of his ship or his flag, but of roads and the right to walk them. Troy steps forward when the room tastes like cruelty and refuses to be silent. Beverly speaks when systems are counted as more important than bodies. Worf offers a blade and a pledge to hold it back. Geordie offers machines as prayers. Data offers numbers as love letters to reality. Nechayev stands like a statue and then breaks like a person who learned something. The Emperor speaks last. He offers his wound like evidence and does not offer his pride like perfume. I am asking to be allowed to protect without breaking what I protect, he says. Bind me to a mandate that keeps me honest and keeps them free. You ask for chains, Q says. I ask for vows, he says. The Continuum does not answer yet. They push him out, back into ship and sky, with a word that is also an appointment. Return, it says. We will speak in terms. They leave the road that is a court and re-enter a ship that breathes in standard atmospheres and coffee smells. The instant they do, the bill arrives with teeth. 3 Iconian braided frames open in the outer system and snap their blades in unison. The net holds. The brace groans. The Emperor refuses to press into the lattice and stands to intercept with bare will. Do not, Picard says, before the Golden Man can spend anything more he cannot replace. We hold with what you gave us. We hold without you. Confirmed, Worf says, a grin cracking through severity. Let us strike something that squeals. Thunderchild jinks. Ajax sings, Sagan bites. Phasers walk lines that Geordie wrote with a wrench. Torpedoes punch ribs. The frames crack. 2 collapse. 1 wobbles and tries to cut, and the Emperor simply says no in a small way that no one feels but the blade, and the blade decides to be dull. The prophets send a curl of light across the brace corridor. No intervention, not a rescue. A prayer flag tied to a line. Guinan smiles without saying why. When it is over, when the road still exists and civilians still eat dinner and a shuttle pilot does not crash, Picard turns to the Golden Man. "We cannot keep paying at this rate," he says. "You will fade. I will go to the throne," the Emperor says. His voice is different, not because it is broken, but because he has chosen something heavier. "I will submit to judgment. I will accept limits." Nechayev nods once, as if saving a galaxy sometimes looks like signing surrender terms written by gods. "Approved," she says. "With escort, with counsel, with options if they try to make a show of you." Q smirks. "Oh, we will," he says. "The show is the point." He looks at the Emperor, and all the humor flows out of him like air from a bellows. "Do not lie to my court," he says. "It will not end how you think." "I do not lie," the Emperor says. "You will wish you knew how," Q says. They refuel. They rewrite doctrine. They bandage wounds that look like bruises on walls because sometimes a woman's job is to tape a crack and trust the house to hold. Kids in San Francisco build toy enterprises and argue about whether gold capes are regulation. Kids in Utopia Planitia scrap piles become memorials for a moment. Then they are turned back into parts. The wound in the Emperor's side whispers. It does not say, "submit" anymore. It says optimize, like an old friend's advice. He keeps it out where he can see it. He will not let it speak into his habits from the cupboard. Guinan finds him by a viewport, where Earth does her best impression of patience. "Do you want a story?" she asks. "Yes," he says. "There was a man who killed monsters," she says. "He killed them by believing people could be more than they were. One day, a monster offered to do the killing for him. He said no. He died later. He died in a way that made more people more than they were. The monster died angry and alone. You cannot eat the end of that story and get strong from it. But the people did." "Thank you," he says. "It will hurt," she says, "and you will keep your hands open anyway." He nods. He prepares to walk into a court built by beings who play at godhood without shame. He tells Picard, "Your ship is a church. Then be a good congregant," Picard says. He does not ask to go. He knows where his jurisdiction ends and his friendship begins. The call comes with no ceremony. The continuum speaks in a tone a human would call fed up with war and inhumanity and very fond of drama. "Come," it says. "Bring your wound. Bring your rules." He goes. The fleet assembles an escort because pageantry is a weapon when pointed at predators. Two nebulas shoulder the Enterprise like brothers. A wing of defiance bristle like small dogs that will bite God ankles. A single Vulcan cruiser slides in with the quiet of a knife put down on velvet. Within him, the null wound hums. It promises ease. He breathes, and the breath is prayer and technique and habit. He names civility. He names restraint. He names cost. The hum remains and hurts less when he says the names. A last sign from the prophets threads the sky near the wormhole. A spiral of light that fades like laughter heard rooms away. They do not promise victory. They promise witness. The bridge crew looks at their captain, and the captain looks at their guest, and the guest looks at their sky, and they all look like people who have decided to be adult about pain. Recap. The Borg tuned their blade to him. Locutus Ascendant made his offer. The Emperor refused and bled. Starfleet learned to crack frames. The prophets nodded once. The continuum called. The wound hums like a warning and a metronome. "Helm," Picard says. "Ahead. We go to judgment." The stars do not blink. The ship moves. The story does not pause to let anyone catch up. They go with ceremony trimmed to function. A wedge of ships that look small and sharp against the night. Enterprise at point. 2 Nebula class abreast, a Vulcan Sura class like a blade sheathed in reason, 4 Defiants stacked in a staggered diamond, every deflector tuned to bracelane frequencies. The Emperor floats ahead of the formation without touching the lattice, a lantern carried by a careful hand. Sick bay hums like a thoughtful hive. Beverly runs scans that have no textbook name. The Emperor sits on a biobed, adjusted to tolerate the mass he does not have to impose. He lets the light at his edges dim without shame. When she lifts a tool that measures coherence, he does not flinch. "This is not tissue," Beverly says, voice soft, eyes hard. "It's your handshake, like we've been saying. The null cut went through the grip. It will heal if you stop gripping." "I will not," he says. "I know," she says. "I'm telling you what it costs." Troy stands with her arms folded, gaze on the numbers and the man. "Your pain is not performance," she says. "Good. Keep it that way. Don't make it a sermon for us. Let us believe in the work without your martyrdom." He inclines his head. "I will try." He leaves sickbay smelling faintly of antiseptic and honesty. In the corridor outside, Worf waits with a small bundle wrapped in cloth like a weapon he is ashamed to show. He offers it with 2 hands. "A blade forged by my grandfather," Worf says. "It is not for your hand. It is for your mind. Remember, we stand next to you. You are not singular in this war." He accepts the bundle and does not open it. "Thank you," he says. "I prefer to be a wall among walls." "Good," Worf says, satisfied like a man who has thrown a punch that lands on character instead of bone. They pass a small chapel, where candles are pixels faked by a replicator for fire safety and faith. Guinan sits inside without pretending she does anything else. Picard steps in behind the Emperor and feels like a parishioner in a uniform that isn't funny. The air holds witnesses older than the ship. Dogma says no, Guinan says without preface. Koss says maybe. What does Duty say? Duty says yes, he answers. Duty always says yes. The question is to whom? Not to pain, she says. Not to your title, to people. He looks at the cluster of low lights where someone has put a mug with a name etched on it. I have always tried, he says. Try again, she says. Then try softer. The convoy reaches a gap between brace corridors. The interstitial quiet between humming lanes. Space feels thinner here, cleaner. A place where decisions echo. Geordie's boards glow with caution. We should increase spacing, he says. If something hits us here, I don't want hard lines between ships. Give it nothing to spread along. Do it, Riker says. Defiance widened to catch. The intercept comes like a word arriving in an argument. Sharp, too fitting, prepared. A wedge-shaped warship claws out of a fissure like a mirror turned into a blade. The ISS Triumvir. Terran Empire livery welded over Federation elegance. Gold and iron, proud and mean. Its captain broadcasts without asking. The man on the screen is the Emperor of mankind, with the angles harder and the mercy bled out. A crown of thorns forged into an iron circlet. Eyes that know the quick way to victory and choose it every time. Brother, he says, voice purpose without apology. Your restraint is a design flaw. Miraphobie names himself by existing. The Terran Imperator, forged by a universe where hope is a currency for fools. The crew stiffens in the simple shock of seeing an optimization offered as if it were love. Troy tastes the field and feels the greasy competence of a man who would choose security over dignity and call it evolution. Imperator, Picard says, and the word is sour and accurate. This is not your theatre. It is every theatre, the Imperator says. Wherever the breed of man is threatened, I am free to tread, and wherever softness invites the knife, I bring steel. He looks at the golden man and does not smile. I am you without hesitation. Come with me. We will end this quickly. I would end it alive, the Emperor says. Alive does not mean breathing. It means worthy. The Terran ship flicks power up without shame. Its deflector shimmers with a field that hums at subspace like a shepherd's crook. Control, not protection. Geordie breathes out a word that is not polite. That's a lattice grip tuned for coercion, he says. They built a leash into their shields. Section 31, Riker mutters. Because some sins rhyme across universes. Stand down, Picard says to the screen. All Captain. You will not deploy coercive subspace in Federation space. Federation space, the Imperator says, tasting the phrase like a failure. You will lose because you use the slow names. Prime, he adds, turning back to the Golden Man. We can save them. We can fix them. We can stop the worm play acting as divinity from writing laws we do not need. We can make this sky safe by making it strong. Strong is not a synonym for safe, the Emperor says. And safe has never meant deserving. Philosophy wastes lives, the Imperator says, and ignites a spear of hard light from the Triumvir's prow, its frequency singing to subspace in a voice that says, obey. The spear lunges for the Emperor. He meets it with open hands and refuses to push. The first contact makes the lattice wince. The brace lanes quiver as if they are watching. He cups the blow's premise and shows it a mirror. It finds itself ugly and falters. Do not escalate, Picard orders. Hold formation. Worf, fire only if fired upon. The Imperator smirks. You are fired upon, he says, but he means the principle, not the shot. The Triumvir veers. A wing of mirror defiance slips out behind, their knives out, shields humming the same obedience song. They knife toward the braced corridor like men who think roads belong to the fastest. Hold, Picard repeats. He opens a channel all-ship, cross-universe, across etiquette. Imperator, withdraw. This is judgment in progress. The wormhole opens like a god clearing its throat. Not Bajor's river exactly. A smaller sign, a bead of light that hangs in the dark between the two emperors. It does not speak in words. It spills a feeling. Stop arguing in the hallway. Reach the throne. The Triumvir's spear dims unbidden. The Imperator shudders as a being outside his doctrine brushes his face with a hand too gentle to be weakness. He sneers to keep from admitting the awe. Prophecy, he spits. Worm tricks. Q appears on Enterprise's main viewer without so much as a flourish. House rules, he says cheerfully. No cheating on the way to court. If you keep brawling, I will take your toys. The Imperator bares his teeth. You think you can take me? Oh yes, Q says lazy. And I will do it in an outfit you would hate. The Imperator stares at his brother and sees not softness, but ballast. He hates that more. This universe will beg for my version of you, he says. When it cries, send for me. I will not, the Emperor says, even when I cry. The Triumvir folds space like an insult and is gone. A silence falls that is less relief than deferral. The prophet's bead fades like a patient parent walking away, because the children agree to get in the car. They reach the continuum's threshold as a fleet, and then as a story. The world changes around them like a set on a stage that knows light. The escort ships are gone, or different, or narrative. Enterprise lands without landing on a boulevard lined with statues of lost chances. A citadel rises ahead, a cathedral in geometries not built for human sight. Arches of nothing, pillars of rules, windows showing pasts that never were. Golden guards line the approach, figures of light wearing discipline, not weapons, faceless and attentive. Between each stands a figure shaped like a person and made of absence. Blanks, bailiffs, nulls that drink any will too loud. The Emperor's light hushes when he passes them. He respects the hush. It keeps him honest. Picard walks beside him in dress uniform without embellishment. He feels very human and very small and exactly himself. Troy's presence is a hand at his back, steady. Beverly looks left and right, like a field doctor taking inventory of a war she cannot triage. Worf walks as if other people can see his pride and may borrow it. Data walks with the happiness of a mind allowed to map a new thing and not punished for the hunger. Nechayev walks with chin up, eyes open, woman among gods who will not bend, because bending is not the same as bowing. They enter the hall. It is not a hall. It is a throne room and a courtroom and a river mouth. Q stands at the base of a dais that is also a cliffside. On the cliff, the continuum sits as a chorus of doors. Each opens to a decision. Each implies a price. Welcome to judgment, Q says, without smirk. He wears a robe that looks like satire and feels like office. Proceed. The Emperor kneels because it is not subservience. It is alignment. He kneels like a soldier in a chapel designed by math. I ask for mandate, he says. Not for permission to be terrible, for constraints that bind me to protect without breaking what I am sworn to protect. The first exchange is not spoken. The hall fills with a feeling like being watched by a teacher who both loves and expects. The Emperor's mind stretches, then is held gently still. The continuum touches the wound where the null blade cut and tastes not pain, but chosen restraint. It approves and is annoyed to approve. It shows him 1,000 worlds that died when demigods refused counsel. It shows him one that lived because someone accepted a leash and called it a promise. Picard feels none of this and all of it. He steps forward into words because words are the human weapon. He has operated under our command, he says. He has taken counsel. He has reduced harm when he could have chosen spectacle. He cut only when the road demanded it. He saved our people. He damaged our infrastructure. He helped us mitigate it. We are not asking you to crown him. We are asking you to put him on a list he cannot write for himself. Beverly steps up because medicine belongs where rules are set. His wound is not finite, she says. We cannot pay his bill with his body. We need limits or we will use him until the part of him that refuses easy answers is gone. Then you won't be judging him. You'll be judging us. Worf speaks 10 words. I will fight him if he becomes what I fear. He means it. That is why it carries. The continuum burns through time and shows the Emperor moments he has been cruel for expedience. And he does not lie. It shows him children who lived because he chose mercy. It asks him if he would kill them to save 10,000 he cannot name. He says sometimes, and hates it, and refuses to love the hate. Honesty noted, Q says, unable not to smile at a man who admits ugly truths without making them fashion. The hall stills. The continuum's voice arrives in a chord of meanings made into sentence by mercy. Mandate, it says. Terms follow. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. The Emperor may not shape subspace outside pre-braced corridors, except in immediate defense of civilian lives within direct sensor range. Violations will cut his coherence by design. He may not coerce minds, nor may he rewrite the medium to deny free movement, transport, warp, or thought, except to arrest a weapon already in flight. He may not touch Omega. Upon detection, he must defer to a joint Starfleet continuum protocol to contain and remove without annihilation. He will accept null proximity restraints, bailiff fields, that reduce his output to human scale within residential zones. He will submit to after-action audits with Starfleet and a continuum observer who cannot command him and can end his intervention by presence alone. The Emperor absorbs the rules. He turns them in his hands the way a craftsman turns a tool, before he agrees to make it his. Something inside him loosens with the relief of constraints that match conscience. Something else tightens because limits close doors. He would have kicked open when the screams got loud. Accepted, he says. Not yet, Q says, raising a single finger, delighted and grave. Trial has a second act. The floor between them becomes memory. A battlefield from a past he never fought here rises like a scar, caught under a blue sun that never burned in this galaxy. A city of glass soaked in noise. The Queen's null blade hangs above as if waiting for a cue. Locutus Ascendant stands at the far end, crown luminous, pity entire. The Imperator sits on a throne built from harnesses, warm with practicality. Between them, a child stares at the golden man with hope like a knife. This is not theatre, Q says. This is geometry. Choose. The Queen's blade lunges for the child. Locutus's offer purrs with a permission to abdicate choice. The Imperator's leash hums ready with clean efficiency. The Emperor breathes once, twice, 3 times, naming civility, restraint, cost. He moves. He takes the blade with his bare will and bleeds his coherence into it until it dulls to mercy. He refuses the crown that will make him quick. He steps past the leash. He picks up the child and hands her to Picard, who was not there and is there, and the captain takes her as if that was always his part. He turns back to the court, not triumphant, only correct. Accepted, the continuum says, not offended by the simplicity. The null burn on his left side flares, then cools, then remains. The wound is not healed. The rules will help it not widen. They take him to the last chamber, a room that is a throne without the throne. Here the guards are closer. Here the blank bailiffs stand like stones that drink sunlight. He is smaller here, by design, by consent. A presence that is not Q's and is not the chorus's leans in from behind the wall of rules. It is not the prophets, but it is kin to them. The ethics of a road writ as a being. It whispers into only his mind. Reach the throne, it says. And now it names which. Not the continuums, not Bajor's. The throne he never built in this sky because he is trying to be a neighbor, not an emperor. Refuse the crown, the whisper finishes, and is gone. He looks at Q. Q looks at him. They nod like men who share both contempt for theatre and respect for stagecraft. You will accept the mandate, Q says for the record. You will go, and you will be watched. I prefer witness to worship, the Emperor says. Good, Q says. We despise idols. They reduce humor. They leave. Pageantry reverses itself. The guards turn to light. The nulls let his light breathe again, and he resists the temptation to swell. The citadel folds like a book a child puts away before running to a meal. Outside the hall, that is not, smack in the place where space is real and men still eat, because they are hungry, and not because a metaphor asks them to. Danger arrives like a test of the new rules. 2 Borg frames open at the edge of braced reach. Modest and well placed, they do not lunge for him. They knife for a civilian convoy bound from Mars to Ceres. Positions, Picard says, already moving because doctrine is a braid of law and practice. Net up, brace strains with intolerance. The Emperor stands where the bailiff fields allow and feels their pressure like a hand on the back of the head that keeps him from shouting when a whisper will do. He watches the frames, finds the joints, and refuses to lay lattice. He calls firing solutions in short words. Worf, he says, 2 degrees aft on the port frame's bottom rib. Cut there. Ajax, wait. Now. They fire. The frame cracks. The second frame tries to carve a corridor and finds the bailiff presence reaching from nowhere. It is not power. It is a prohibition. The blade dulls. The convoy slides past, shaken, intact. We can do this, Geordi says. Relief scrambled with adrenaline. Within lanes, with nets, with rules. We can, Picard says. We will. They return to Earth in a formation that has learned its manners. The child under the bridge looks up at the red arc that is a bridge and knows nothing of courts and mandates. She knows men in gold and ships with clean lines and the feeling of not being scared for 10 minutes. It is enough. They gather once more in that ridiculous small chapel because the ship knows where to close loops. Picard, Worf, Troy, Data, Beverly, Geordi, Nechayev on a screen, the Vulcan in person, because logic wanted to be present for this part. The Emperor stands slightly back by choice. Terms, Picard says, succinct as always. We keep him within braced corridors unless a civilian's life depends, and there is no alternative. We deploy null proximity fields around residentials. We coordinate with a continuum observer. We never touch Omega alone. We file after action audits. We ask him to stop when we say stop. He stops. I will, the Emperor says. Cost, Beverly adds. We monitor his coherence. We make him rest. We do not abuse a tool because we can call it love. I will obey rest, he says, with the faintest smile at the word obey used right. Dogma, Guinan says from the doorway, hat like a private moon. We do not let these rules become excuses. We hold to mercy because we decided. We hold to survival because we decided. We do not hide behind mandates to avoid choosing. We will choose, Picard says. The wormhole flares like a nod. The screen that is Nechayev's face softens by a millimeter. You have a mandate, she says. You also have a deadline. The Dominion is moving at the border. The Romulans are watching. The Borg are learning. We are done admiring ourselves. Get to work. Aye, Admiral, Picard says. He smiles because he likes when she is herself. The Emperor steps to the viewport and looks at the blue and white that believes it deserves to be defended and tries to prove it. He feels the bailiff null field soft at his back. An agreed hand. He feels the wound in his side not close but stop widening. He feels a throne he refuses to sit on dissolve around him like frost when the sun is rude. He turns to Picard. Your church has good hymns, he says. We sing them off key, Picard says. Those are the best kind, the Emperor says. An alert pulses, not a shout, a peal of a bell. A blade has opened beyond Jupiter again. Under new rules, he does not leap. He looks to the captain. The captain nods. Go, Picard says, which is a permission and a command and a reminder. Within the lanes, the Emperor steps into the braced corridor. His light tightens. He feels the cost like a tab under his tongue and knows the rules turned it into an invoice he can pay in installments. He goes to work. And somewhere in the mirror universe, on a throne made from harnesses and the backs of men who fail to say no, the Imperator narrows his eyes. Somewhere in the hive, the Queen tilts her head and composes a new verse. Somewhere in the Prophet's river, a ripple laughs without cruelty. Somewhere in the continuum, a judge sharpens a joke for a later day. They have reached the throne. Next comes the choice, and it will not be easy, which is how you know it matters. The blade near Jupiter is a test he passes on purpose. He stays within the lanes. He calls targets by number. He lets the net and the ships do the killing, while he barks 3 words at a time that save whole decks. The convoy slides by and doesn't know how close it came to being an anecdote. When the last frame collapses, silence falls like a good blanket. He returns to Earth's sky. His light is tight and contained by the bailiff field. It makes him look like a statue warm to life. The wound hums. He lets it hum. He has an appointment. The continuum does not send a trumpet. It opens a door in a hallway of Starfleet headquarters and makes it a hillside, then a room, then a harbour. He steps through because he always does. Picard steps with him because friendship is a jurisdiction too. The hall shows 3 chairs. One is a portal made of homes, familiar and soft, edged with mist. One is a knife rack organized by law. One is a desk stacked with ledgers, a pen on a chain. Your 3 paths, Q says, perched on the desk, not mocking, only present. You pick, we codify. He does not sit. He looks. Return. He sees his old sky. He sees gold and ash, banners and teeth, a throne and 1,000 wars he already lost to win what he saved. He sees himself stepping back through a seam that will close behind him. He sees his memory of this place fading until it is only a feeling that makes him kinder in the margins and crueler in the text. He will go home. He will be himself and not. Children here will live without him because he left them their lanes. The bill is that he will not remember why he is gentler. The prize is that he will not remember the hurt. He hates that arithmetic. Free agent. He sees himself as a star with a sword, moving along borders and bruises, stepping into nights because he knows where fear hides. He sees Section 31 learning to smile better. He sees captains turning into petitioners. He sees Nechayev draw a line and he steps across it because someone is screaming on the other side. He sees schism as a slow leak that becomes a flood. He becomes a faction. He becomes a myth that moves votes. He would save worlds and salt the law. He hates that victory. Sanctioned servant. He sees the pen and the ledger and the chain. He sees audits and small humiliations. A lieutenant with a clipboard who tells him to wait. A bailiff field he cannot argue with. An admiral who makes him drink water and sleep because the schedule says so. He sees maximal impact inside rules that are not theatrical. He sees the worst day when obedience costs the last second needed to stop a blade, and he does not get to be the exception. He sees himself kept honest by people who will defy him if he forgets to be gentle. He sees the work. He loves this burden because it is the shape of duty with witnesses. He looks at Picard. They do not need to speak. They speak anyway. If you return, Picard says, we will endure. We will be worse for it. We will still be ourselves. I cannot ask you to leave. If you show up at the edges, Picard continues, eyes tired and clear, you will save lives that then break rules you helped write. You will break me with gratitude. Don't. He breathes. He names civility, restraint, cost. He says third. Q taps the ledger. By choosing this desk, you are also choosing to hear me say no, he says. I will enjoy that. I accept, the Emperor says. His shoulders lower not because he is small, but because the weight finally has a shape. The room sloughs away like a curtain. They are on the boulevard of statues again. The chorus of doors opens with a polite click. The continuum speaks in a tone that could be printed into law. You will be sanctioned servant, it says. Bound, empowered, watched. The rules arrive as bracelets that are not chains and feel like promises. One sits above each wrist like a band of light with nested sigils. The Federation star, the Starfleet delta, a slimmer teardrop that hints at a wormhole, a line that is a legal clause, a small blank circle that makes his light hush near homes. They do not burn. He is the one who keeps them heavy. A sign appears where a crest would go and does not erase the one he brought. The double-headed eagle in gold folds its wings a fraction, and the Starfleet arrowhead slides between them, not piercing, standing. The eagle's eyes look outward. The delta points forward. Around them, a gentle ring like those worn by Bajoran acolytes completes the circle. Terms, Q says, and the chamber writes them in the air for everyone whose work involves being annoyed by rules. He will keep within braced corridors unless lives require exception. He will keep his hands out of the mines. He will not cut movement to trap a foe when such cutting starves the innocent. He will hand Omega to the joint protocol and hold his breath until it passes, He will live within null bands in residential gravity wells. He will accept an observer who cannot command him and can end a moment by being present. He will obey Starfleet tactical lead unless immediate civilian loss compels disobedience, and then he will write his reasons in plain words after. He will submit to audits. He will be trusted because he will be verifiable. He says yes to each clause until the echo stops. It feels like a sacrament. The hall nods. Q steps back. The guards turn, and the blanks let his light swell back to a level chosen by consent. "It is done," Q says. "Try not to be interesting." The first test is immediate by design. The Romulans have been listening with their ears on the soles of their feet and their hands on their knives. A Tal Shiar warbird slips out of a shadow near Proxima and reaches for an undocumented satellite the Iconians once used to whisper secrets into dreams. They do not intend to fire. They intend to watch him break his rules. He does not. He calls Picard. He calls the net. He points with his chin. "There," he says to Worf, 3 degrees low. He does not touch the lattice. He does not grab the ship with his will. He uses the lanes. The net sings. The warbird, denied a clean exit, flips its cloak by reflex and reveals a belly full of thalaron that it did not mean to display in polite company. It slinks away under a wall of recorded proof and diplomatic regret. Section 31 calls Nechayev in the middle of the night and says the quiet part loud. "We can build a bridle like the Terrans. We just saw it in their field. We can control him better than Law can." The line goes quiet for 4 seconds, while a woman decides who she is. "No," Nechayev says. "We learn today. Learn with me." He rests. His rest is not sleep. It is a ritual of shrinking his light until the bailiff field hums pleasantly and Dr. Crusher stops frowning. He reads too, because understanding is maintenance. He reads a legal commentary on the Warp 5 Treaty. He reads a child's letter from Utopia Planitia that says, "You saved my dad and my mum says to say thank you." He reads it again, because gratitude is a vitamin. He does not read propaganda. He has no use for it. The Queen returns without pageantry and with a dentist tool. She tests the brace somewhere near the Kuiper belt and is shocked when the tool snaps, because 4 defiants arrived, like questions with knives, and the sanctioned servant refused to press. She learns. She adapts. She writes a memo no one else will see. Try mimetic metastability. Teach the roads to forget themselves. She smiles. She tests a word. Forgetting. It tastes like victory. The test breaks a freighter captain's day. She is hauling tritanium and recipes. She watches her lane flicker, blink, and then go blank, as if a road changed its mind about being a road. She swears and taps a panel and says a prayer that involves a name she never expected to use. Emperor. He hears it. He does not carve. He does not grab the medium and force it to remember. He asks the lane to recall the shape it chose, and he uses the bracelets to lean into the braced nodes, like a longshoreman pushing a barge with a rope. It answers because lanes respond to agreement. It brightens by inches. The freighter hums as if a friend put a shoulder to its bumper. "Thank you," the captain whispers. And then, because the universe is embarrassing when it is kind, she adds, "Sorry we're heavy." "You are," he says into the silence, smiling. "It is all right." The king of nothing arrives with a crown full of something he thinks is clever. Locutus ascendant in a new skin. This time not a face, but an argument woven into a treaty. Section 31 brings it in a box and says, "It's a directive. It lets you act without asking when lives are on the line. It makes the auditors sign first. They call it the efficiency clause. It tastes like an apology in advance." He reads it. He looks at Picard. Picard flips to page 4 and points to a sentence that, if used wrong, builds a humanitarian catastrophe out of a footnote. He does not sign. He writes a counter clause in plain language. If my disobedience saves 1,000, I will take the court-martial in daylight. If my obedience harms 1 when I could have saved them by taking the court-martial, I will not hide behind your clause. He signs that and hands the pen to Picard. Picard signs too, not because he likes paperwork, but because he understands oaths. The Imperator does not remain quiet. He returns with a fleet painted in the Terran palette and a new sermon. He stops just outside the mandate's jurisdiction and broadcasts a seed phrase designed to germinate in proud minds. He chose chains. He calls it a warning. He calls it pity. He's offering recruitment with a martyr's sneer. Worf answers with 10 seconds of honest laughter on an open frequency. It lands harder than a manifesto because truth prefers brevity. The Imperator cuts the channel. The decisive battle is not the biggest. It is the one with the least room for poetry. The Queen brings 3 frames to the Mars, Jupiter Lane, and hides a 4th inside civilian traffic like a splinter in bread. She hums her subtraction blade at half power, enough to make Geordi curse and the lattice gasp. She intends to force him to break his rules. She intends to capture his shape when he breaks them. He does not break them. He applies them like a knife. Brace strain, Picard asks. Within tolerance if we hold our fire discipline, Geordi says, sweating math. Hold it, Picard says. The Emperor calls shots like a conductor abbreviating a symphony. Node 7, rib 3, cut high, shift left. He does not touch the medium. He does not reach. He stands inside the bailiff field and takes the hurt that hits him anyway. Because he exists. He watches Worf slice at a joint no one else could see. He watches Ajax jink through a bad idea and come out clean because someone did the drill. He watches the 4th frame's ambush bloom, and he says, no, only to it, by name, not to the whole sky. The blade goes dull in his palm. The frame collapses, the brace holds, the convoy passes, the bill is small enough to pay with sleep. Now, Picard says, and the fleet finishes what the rule started. After, Nechayev reads the report twice and deletes half the adjectives and signs. The Vulcan adds a footnote that clarifies a limit without removing latitude. Section 31 stamps a copy and files it, and writes a second memo, recommending an emergency override, keyed only to the Emperor and a single admiral. It goes nowhere, because they are not the only ones who can keep a secret. The Continuum's observer appears for the first audit. They look like a tired magistrate who has seen every vice and made peace with all virtues. They watch him fill in forms. They watch Picard refuse to massage numbers to protect reputation. They nod once. We approve, they say. We will disapprove later. Hold shape. He does. The prophets send one more sign. A child at Deep Space Nine draws a circle with 2 wings and a small arrow inside. She pins it to a corkboard with a piece of gum. The drawing lights for 1 heartbeat, and then is a drawing again. Kira looks at it and does not roll her eyes. She smiles because sometimes gods tell jokes to remind you they are still paying attention. The Queen changes tactics. She sends not a blade but a song, a phrase that tells roads to forget and stations to call the wrong names for things. It makes small confusions. It builds to larger ones. It is mimetic and proud of that modernity. It arrives at Utopia Planitia as a sudden belief that safety doors should open when alarms ring instead of closing. People die that way. He answers first with words. He broadcasts definitions across the braced lanes. Door means barrier in fire. Lane means path for all and priority for emergency. Beam means not for living things right now. He uses his voice like chalk on a board. It helps. It is not enough. He asks the prophets for a map. They give him a string. He ties it to an idea and drags. The mimetic fog follows like a kite. The net clamps. The dampeners hum. The fog lands in a box built for it because someone spent 3 nights making a thing with no name until it had one. Geordie names it the common sense box and puts a strip of tape on it with a heart and an expletive and a warning to never let it out again. He pays. The wound does not widen. It aches. He watches the bracelets and he does not resent them. Time moves. The Dominion flexes at the border and then remembers that the last time they misread Picard's poker face, they lost 3 good ships and a propaganda campaign. They flex anyway. He does not go. He is not a border guard. He is a lane keeper. He keeps to his charter. Sisko nods from far and respects a man who knows his job. The Romulans test, forgive, test. He embarrasses them politely. They write small grudges on big stones and pretend not to read them later. The Mirror Emperor watches and waits. He will cross when the bill is due, and someone here flinches from paying. He trims his fleet. He polishes his leash until he can pretend it is a ribbon. The last choice is not a battle. It is a rescue. A Borg vector disrupts the Mars yard and a school shuttle at the same time, designed to force him to prioritize. If he chooses the yard, children die. If he chooses the shuttle, hulls burn. He cannot bend subspace to hold both. He cannot be in 2 places with the kind of specificity the rules require. It is a trap set for his mandate. He refuses its premise. He calls Picard. Your choice, he says. You hold the law. I hold the child. Picard nods once. We save the shuttle, he says into the line that reaches every ship. We let the yard burn. He expects Worf to argue. Worf does not. We are warriors, Worf says softly. We do not make weapons out of children. The words move. Ajax takes a beam meant for the shuttle and writes a new scar on its hull. Thunderchild runs hot and runs anyway. The Emperor steps to the edge of a lane and simply asks the shuttle to remember where forward is. It does. The yard burns. Dock 17 goes. 3 hulls in scaffolds become anatomy lessons in flame. People die. Men and women who build ships know they build coffins some days. They do not rage at a man in gold. They rage at gravity and math and the way knives behave when arguments run out. Then they go back to work. After, Starfleet lines up to speak. They do not apologize. They do not flatter. They maintain. Some send him messages. We would have made the same call. Some say nothing. A welder sends a picture of Dock 17's plaque and writes, "Make it mean something." He does, mostly by not writing poems about it. He stands with Guinan in the chapel that is a set of pixels pretending to be small fires. He says, "I thought saving everyone requires more cleverness." "It does," she says. "But you're not here to be clever. You're here to be decent." He laughs and the laugh is tired and true. He dresses for work again. The bracelets glow in the corners of his eyes. His crest shines where the eagle and the arrow meet. He looks like an idea you can build a policy around. Picard joins him at the viewport, lines deep and kind. "We have a charter," he says. "We have a friend. We have a bill," the Emperor says. "We'll pay it," Picard says. They shake hands like men who built a bridge together and intend to repair it often. The day goes. He uses the lanes. He counts his breaths. He learns the names of 27 more engineers and 7 children and 1 admiral who finally smiled. At night, the child under the bridge in San Francisco sleeps with a toy shaped like a ship and a paper eagle she colored with a marker. Her window glows because the city glows. Her parents drink tea and do not talk about the worst day, because today was not it. Above Mars, the lattice is still a scar. It shines very faintly when big planets pass nearby. It will ache when it rains. People will map their future around that ache. They will put their lanes where the scars already are. It is a kind of healing. He stands at the edge of the Earth's sky and looks smaller than the myths that brought him here and larger than the duties that will keep him. And he is exactly the right size. He goes on patrol. He hears the Queen whisper forget to a road and hears the road say no back. He hears the Imperator call him coward and hears his own pulse answer enough. He hears Q composing a joke about paperwork that will kill at the next trial, and he smiles. He feels the wound and names it. He feels the bracelets and does not resent them. He feels the crest and does not worship it. He feels the law, and the law feels like a hand on his back, guiding, not pushing. He is sanctioned servant of the Federation, bound to braced corridors and mercy rules and audits, allowed to be terrible only when kindness needs a knife. He will choose and bleed and be watched. He will pick up the bill. Codex note. Under Continuum, Accord 11, Theta and Starfleet General Order 28 Sigma, the sanctioned servant may act within braced subspace corridors under Starfleet tactical lead, with null proximity restraint in residential zones, constrained by non-coercion and Omega deference clauses. Violations automatically degrade his coherence and trigger audit halt by observer presence. The Borg will adapt. The Romulans will scheme. The Dominion will loom. The Mirror will leer. The Prophets will watch. Q will make jokes that hold shape. Starfleet will argue, improve, fail, admit, fix. Civilians will build and eat and sing. He will be there when the lane flexes. He will step back when the lane holds. He will not write poems. He will feed the fire, not the song. The last image is not him. It is an arrow nested in wings, painted on the side of a Martian school. Children run under it and do not see it because they are late for class. A welder smells hot steel and coffee and says to no one, "We know where the roads go now." The sky says nothing and approves.